Yeah, but what I was saying, so yeah, my friend Max, I had an interview with him, like, I guess 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago or whatever, but we were talking, and I was kind of just expressing how appreciative I am of, like, his sentiment, because he's somebody who I think will make music, like, his entire life, no matter where it takes him. It's just, like, he does it because he loves it. And I think that I was kind of resonating with what you were saying because of the same thing. It's like, I feel like I get kind of that same sentiment from you, like that you'll make music no matter what because you love it. And it's like point blank period.
Oh yeah, no, I mean like I've thought about this a lot, and there's part of me that like doesn't want to speak this into the universe because it would definitely suck, but like I think I was listening to like Beethoven or something recently.
Can you tilt that up? Sorry.
Oh yeah. No, you're good. Let's do this.
I guess you're so tall. There you go. Hell yeah.
She's tall, spindly, but yeah, I was listening to or no, I don't remember. I don't think I was listening to Beethoven. I think I was like thinking about this one man play I saw about Beethoven once, and like it's really cool. I'm going off on a tangent, but there's this guy in San Diego named I don't know if he's based out of San Diego anymore, but his name is Hershey Felder. And
it's a cool name.
It's really cool, and he does these like one dude plays about the lives of composers. And I think he does like the one he does one about George Gershwin, and that one he's playing George Gershwin and like sort of doing a soliloquy about like that composer's entire life. But the other one, he does one about like Chopin, like he does one about Beethoven. And the Beethoven one, it's actually from the perspective of like, I forget the guy's name, but this other composer who studied under Beethoven and like kind of viewed him as like the surrogate father figure. And so like you see, it's like this 2-act, like one person play where this person that like studied under Beethoven is like recounting their like dynamic and like Beethoven's life and like this like sort of figure that he was. And like, it talks about his, you know, going deaf as he was still like composing some of his most like brilliant music and yada yada yada. And you know, like, not that I think I'm like a Beethoven tier musician by any means, but I have thought about it, and I definitely would like find a way to make music if I went deaf.
If you went deaf?
Because there, I mean, like, I guess in contemporary music, people don't use like sheet music or scores like as much anymore. I mean, in like major label settings and stuff where, you know, an Ariana Grande song has like a bunch of strings and shit, you'll deal with that. But like, I mean, DAWs and like MIDI, like people always talk about in the producer world, I feel like how much of a bad thing this is. But, you know, in contemporary music production, like we've almost learned to make music visually, like just as much as with our ears. Yeah. And while sometimes like that can be a pitfall in that, you know, if you're EQing something, you might like implicitly start to learn to trust what the EQ like graph looks like rather than just what you're hearing. But I think there's this other kind of great side effect where like people who are learning to produce music themselves are like low-key learning how to read sheet music because of MIDI. Like, you know, that they're drawing in like their 808 patterns and like their melodies and stuff, and like your brain starts to learn that, okay, like on this
That's
grid,
really interesting. I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah, like like you start to kind of realize like, oh, on this grid, like, okay, this, you know, this pattern when the kick is hitting on like these beats on the grid, it sounds like boom, boom, boom. And like
that's like relatable to drum charts.
Yeah, well, like you see from drawing that same pattern, like I don't know, like I've made a lot of shitty practice trap beats in my time. It's a pretty regular occurrence in my garage, but you know, like I know what what it
looks like.
Yeah, what it looks like on a MIDI grid. So like I feel like, you know, if it came down to it, I'm not, once again, like I feel like I've already spoken this into the universe too much, and like I don't want this to happen. But if I did lose my hearing, I would still make music. There's nothing more fun to me.
And I think that's beautiful. Like, I think one big realization in my life where I've kind of come to like have the same sentiment was, I think like as of lately, I mean, as I moved to LA and like as I've tried to like grow as an artist, I've like really tried to like kind of separate what I love from it being a career. And that's a really difficult thing to do because like, I mean, like kind of similar to what you said, but like you making music, like for me, like starting a music media company, like it's my baby. Like it's all I want to do is make money from this, you know? Like obviously I want to do other things, but it's like all I want to do is like have this be what keeps me going day to day. But it's like when you get so much in the mindset of like, this needs to be my job, I need this to be my job, it's like you forget why you started doing it, you know? And it's like, I think you have to understand that like if you keep doing it for long enough and you're good at it and you keep progressing, eventually it will become your job, but you can't put a timetable on stuff like that. I think I got so much in this like toxic mentality of like putting a timetable on like my own success for so long. And I think that is really fucking bad for like the longevity of your like artistic endeavor.
Also just like for your mental health, like
That
period. Cause I definitely can relate. Like I think especially in LA, cause we're at the epicenter of the entertainment industry where youth is so commodified. And it's like, if you haven't done X, Y, and Z by the time you're 24, then like your life is basically over.
I just laugh tracked it. Me
I was
too.
like, who else is in
Accidental laugh track.
But no, yeah, I mean, I'm 26, so I kind of had to do my like turning 25 and then, you know, visibly not being at the like quote unquote like career point I want to be at. I sort of had to reconcile with that already. But yeah, I mean, it can definitely get to you in that whole idea of having to accomplish certain things before a certain age, like you said, like putting a timetable on it. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah.
Also, oh, sick. Yeah. No,
So whatever you want.
it just fucks up your mental health. It really, I think, twists the way you approach being creative in a bad way. And then, yeah, you end up not doing it for the purity of the experience, but like so that you can check that thing off your list before it's too late.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you miss out on a chance to stop and smell the roses and enjoy the process of creating it. You know what I mean? I think almost, and, you know, like obviously it does take a certain amount, I think, of privilege, like being in these kinds of situations where you can think this way. But
Yeah.
I think sometimes you need to be a little cavalier about your art, and you know, at times it can be beneficial to put aside that survival instinct of like, oh, I have to do this in a money making way so that I can accomplish X, Y, and Z. And then when you just kind of are goofy about it and like do it, at least in my experience, I notice more things tend to happen when I stop worrying about the career implications of a creative decision or of making something and kind of just like worry about tickling that silly part of my lizard brain, you know, like it make neurons go brrr, so I do it type of shit.
And it's such a balance. It's so like, and it's difficult because it's like you can like I fully agree with everything you just said, and you can acknowledge all those things, but then there's still this part of your brain that wants to think about it in like in a financial or like a successful way. You know, like it's so difficult to like put that aside and just like, I'm going to do this because I love it in the way that I love, and period, point blank, that's what I'm going to do. It's like you can acknowledge all those things, but it's so difficult to like find that balance, you know? And I think you're right. Like being in LA, it becomes so easy to compare yourself to everybody. Do you think like you said when you turned 26 or like around that time when you were 25, 26, you like learned to kind of have that balance? How do you think what was the biggest turning point?
I mean, it was a lot. It was probably turning 25 was a big one, because that was like, oh, okay, like I am by definition mathematically in my mid-20s now. Yeah. You know, I had been in a band for like X amount of time, and that, you know, eventually ended. And like when you're in that lifestyle and in that scene, which like you guys have been around in like the Bay Area, like, you know, you've seen it, like it is kind of a bubble.
Very much so, yeah.
You know, like, and what's cool is you can experience these like varying degrees of like quote unquote success, and like you can do a lot of stuff that's super gratifying creatively and professionally. But when you kind of stop doing that and you're not in that bubble or in that routine, I don't know, it sort of felt like starting again at square one. And I mean, like 25 was also, I guess, like a weird year, because that was when I started like transitioning and stuff, and that probably kind of played a role in my shifting my mentality, because it was kind of already like, okay, like because especially like being in LA, like you see the like the dynamic of certain rooms and certain groups of people, and like the people that make the machine go brrr and yada yada yada, and it's
for
like,
sure,
okay, by definition, like I've already, you know, partially lost my seat at this table by being 25, and then it was like, you know, like I never try to be like, wah, poor me, like about this, because like this is just like my existence and my life, so it is what it is. But then it's like, at least because I mean, if we're gonna go into it, like the entertainment industry is just like the fucking boys club. Like, you know, like no matter what, it's like you go into 9 out of 10 rooms of people, and it's kind of just like the boys. So like, for sure, you know, walking into those rooms as like a trans woman, you're sort of like, okay, I've also in a way like partially lost like this seat at the table. So I think around that time, I felt like I had nothing to prove, and you know, I sort of, it allowed me to kind of just drown out all the noise, because I was like, no, like the louder I try to make myself to like get attention from people or to like try to get my music heard, like no one's gonna fucking care.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of allowed me to just like hunker down and be like, like, what do I want to make for fun? Like what makes like, you know, like I was saying, like my little,
Like what makes me tick.
yeah, like what makes my little lizard brain get all wiggly. And you know, that's where I think the EP that I put out came from. Like all those songs were just in my garage, just like kind of dicking around and like seeing what would stick. And you know, I never really, I'd be lying if I said I didn't intend people to hear them. But I definitely, you know, I wasn't trying to make any sort of like big career move with those. It's kind of just like, oh, like
I'm gonna make what I want to make.
Yeah, like I just want to finish a record. I want to get like multiple songs that go together in a certain order and like feel what it feels like to make that thing like beginning to end.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think there's like, I think what you just said is very much an example of like when you exhaust all these options that you thought would work and then they don't get you to like this pinnacle point that's in your head, it kind of breeds like creative freedom in a lot of ways. It's kind of like, it's interesting. It's like the philosophical idea that like, because life is meaningless, life can be like have any meaning that you assign to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that idea, you know, it's like because there isn't like these other musical avenues that are going in the directions you want them to go, you can do anything. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, no, it becomes an open canvas in that way, which is fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, like, you know, like, you're not worried about, like, oh, like, would this song, like, make me look good to a record label? Like, would people like this sound? It kind of, like, what's it called? Like, the song DUI on that record, that came from, like, I was at the San Diego Zoo with, like, my sister, and we were just kind of having a conversation about, like, we share in my family in general, but we kind of share this like really dark sense of humor. And we were joking, like she was joking, like, oh, it'd be really funny to do like a drunk driving themed album because that's just a terrible thing to promote. And I was like, oh my god, like you know, like obviously an album would be a big commitment, but like you could definitely do like a song. And then we were laughing like, oh yeah, like the cover could be just like a little kid like in headlights going ah. That's kind of like where our humor comes from. And I remember, you know, we're walking at the zoo and I think I just listened to Giving Bad People Good Ideas. You know, we were talking about Death Grips earlier. And that song's hilarious because it's like 3 minutes of unrelenting like da 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 like over and over. So my sister and I were like cracking up over this like drunk driving, like song promoting drunk driving idea. And I had that Death Grip song in my head. So I was like, oh, like what if it went like, you should drive drunk, you should drive drunk. You should da, 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 da. And you know, that was the kind of thing where it's like, once it pops in your head, like you don't come up with that. Like that's like, that got given to you. Cause you know, weren't thinking about it and didn't care. You were just laughing. Like I was just laughing with my sister. So then that was one of those songs like, okay, like I have to go home and make that. That's funny. And, yeah, I think through that experience and making the other songs on there, it was kind of like, oh wow, like I enjoy making music a lot more when there's no audience.
No strings attached.
Yeah, like you know, if there's any audience in mind, it's like the people close to me because I want to make them laugh. Like I mean the idea that music and comedy too are like coalescent has been like done to death. I feel like it's been done to death like on podcasts specifically.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So I feel just, you know, I feel funny like standing in front of like a mic with headphones on across from you being like music and comedy are the same thing.
They're literally the same. Yeah.
They're literally the same. But yeah, I mean you know, I think there's a certain enjoyment to, you know, obviously, you know, I think it's more intrinsic to comedy. But there is an enjoyment to creating something with people that are close to you, around you, and then like getting a reaction out of that.
It's like the inside joke becomes not an inside joke anymore.
Yeah.
When other people hear it, you know. I like what you just said about the zoo because I think a lot about one idea I think about a lot is the idea of the creative muses. I have a friend who's like really into this, and he got me like super interested in this idea. But it's like I really believe in like the fact that like there are creative muses that like if you put enough into your art, right? Like if you log those hours at the computer, if you write enough sentences, if you sit down and do the work or whatever, there are these like, I don't know if I believe if they're like some kind of like spirit or some kind of God or really what I believe or like what physical form I think they exist. But it's like, I think there's some kind of like thing above us that gives us these ideas. And
Oh, yeah.
It's weird. I can't even formulate exactly what I think of it, but it's like I truly believe there's some kind of creative muse that like ideas like that come to us for a reason.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm actually really stoked that you went there because that reminds me of like what David Lynch says about creativity. Like, have you seen those interviews with him where he talks about?
I had a friend who brought this up in an interview like recently.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like he always kind of describes it as like this abstract or this ether, or like I think he literally just visualizes it as like a river.
I'm gonna look into this. I'm gonna write it down. I'm looking at it later.
Just even like just like if you search David Lynch on creativity, like this is gonna come up. But he always explains and visualizes it as sort of this spiritual fabric that exists outside of us and like maybe above our realm of immediate perception. But creativity, which is funny because like then by this definition the word creativity is a misnomer because you're not really creating anything, you're sort of like tuning into this frequency that
you're like picking it out.
That exists in like a spirit world. Like I think Pharrell talks about this a lot too, where it's like I think as an artist, like at your best you are an effective lightning rod. Like you know how to tune into that frequency, and like you're not making you're not constructing a house, like you're simply tuning into radio waves and spitting out like what comes out of you. And I think the best artists are like the smoothest conduits for those ideas. Like so like to bring up Pharrell again,
they're the best at like translating those two worlds together.
Yeah, like a thing I saw Pharrell say was that like creativity is like this endless library, and you're just in there like checking out a book. You're borrowing it, and you get to live that story, and you get to regurgitate it and have it like flow through you for like a certain amount of time, but it's not yours. Like,
yes.
It exists already as this sort of combination of concepts, and like in the case of music, like in at least like in Western scale pop music, right? Like let's say there's like 12 tones. Like if we're going microtonal music, then it kind of becomes like you get infinite notes. But like let's say for the sake of writing a pop song, it's like you have 12 notes to pick from. Let's say you're writing that pop song in English, right? There's only X amount of words, X amount of phrases. It's sort of that like monkey at the typewriter allegory that like if you put like the chimpanzee at the typewriter, it's gonna write like Catcher in the Rye at one point if it has forever to do it. Like,
that's such a weird thought.
Every piece of music that like you've ever heard or have ever even like imagined in your head like already exists as a mathematical combination of those things. So you really are just tapping into something that already exists. Like I think in terms of songs I've written that I am most proud of or have like, and I don't even want to say proud of because like I feel like that kind of contradicts what I'm saying. Like it brings ego into it, but like
well, I think there's a certain level of ego that can be into it when it comes when it comes in the form of like being proud. Yeah. I think there's a certain level of ego that can like be healthy if you're like I am proud of this thing that I created, but it's like I think the bad things when that ego crosses from like being proud into like standing on it and not being able to detach from it and move on to the next thing,
or even just not being grateful. Like I don't know, I found that removing the act of creation from like my own responsibility allows me to be grateful for those songs and those ideas when they come to me because they don't feel like mine. It wasn't like, I'm the shit, I came up with this. It's like, oh
thank
no,
you,
like,
I found this.
Like, this existed, this was an idea, and I was fortunate enough and lucky enough, timing wise and situation wise, I was here in this moment to where I could tune into that. And thank you, because it's, when it happens, it feels so fucking awesome, and it feels like something so much bigger and like older and more expansive than you, and it's like it's the best. I love it. I love music. It's so silly.
Yeah, no, I fully I kind of think of it through the way of like if you get to a place in your art, like if you're lucky enough to get to a point where it's like people are appreciating the things that you're making, I think it's very easy to get wrapped up in the idea that you are your art. And that's something that I think can be like a really toxic and slippery slope to be on. And I think that's something that like, like you should be proud of the things that you're creating. Of course you should. But it's like if you get to a place where the only thing of value in your life is your art, you become your art. And some people think that's a good thing, but I think that's an awful thing. I had a conversation recently where I had a friend, we were talking about like he's been in the music industry for like ever. And I asked him, I was like, dude, how do you not get like burnt out with all this stuff? Like, how do you remain so consistent and like not lose the passion that you once had for it? And he looked me dead in the eyes and he was like, what do you do outside of music?
Mm-hmm.
And I did not have an answer for him. I was all like, outside of like running a music media company, I make music like for fun. Like outside of that, it's like I listen to music, and then it's like I write about music, and it's like everything. All my friends are music. It's like everything in my life is musical. And I realized like I'm definitely a victim of attaching myself way too closely to my art. Like I've become my art, and that's something that like I'm trying to get away from, because you have to have things outside of music that like, you know, obviously like everybody in this room and like anybody who like is like us, like music is our favorite thing in the world. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But it's like your favorite thing in the world can't be the only thing in your world, you know?
No, not at all. And then, you know, like you run the risk of it being like your least favorite thing in the world at that point, because you get so burnt out on it, and then you don't want to admit it because it's your entire life. And I think it's cool you bring that up too, because I feel like it ties into what we started our conversation about. I think there's definitely a relationship between like, you know, the effects of capitalism on art and like the like
commodifying art,
and like the timetables we build on ourselves, and like the feeling that we need to like succeed based on like whatever definition of that. And you know, it makes it so like you get this tunnel vision of like, oh my god, like I only have this amount of time to like accomplish this before you know, you don't even know before what, but in your head it's like before it's all fucked. And then, you know, you get this tunnel vision and you only do that thing. And then, you just forget to live life, because you can't make art without living life. Then, like, the only thing you have to tap into is, like, sitting, banging your head on the fucking table, being frustrated about, like, not creating art.
Yes.
And, like, I don't know, I was talking to somebody about this recently. Like, I think there are some, like, really cheesy hair metal songs that are an exception to this rule. But in my opinion, there's only one great song that's written about music. That would be like Sir Duke by Stevie Wonder.
Interesting.
In my opinion, you know, like I'm half saying that as a meme, but like, you know, because there's all those '80s songs. There's like rock and roll, like you get these bands that, because like, you know,
and it's all like weird predatorial white men from the '60s
every time. But like, you know, you get these bands that it's like they're probably so tunnel visioned in on like living the like recording artist dream and
so
being a band that makes it, that they just like only write songs about rock and roll. And then it's like, you know, you might like that song the first time you hear it, but you're not gonna like carry that with you. Like, I don't know, I think it's very few people outside of fictional characters in Netflix shows that are like driving around and being like, oh, I love rock and roll
Jack
so
Black
much.
And School of Rock.
Jack Black is maybe the intended audience for that. Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna shut the fuck up. That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, like I don't know. I think it's important to take breaks and have other instruments. God, maybe I need to take a break. Have other interests, because it's gonna fuel the art that you make. It's gonna be refreshing, and it's okay to need a vacation from the thing you love doing. If you need the vacation, like you probably are doing it too much, and there is such thing as doing it too much.
One thing I think about a lot is like, I think part of loving music is hating music. You know, like I think that's part of like I actually think that is true for love of every kind, whether it's a love with like a romantic partner, love with a best friend, love with like an art form, love with anything. Part of love is hate. Well, it's like I think those two things are very connected. It's like at a certain point, it's like I think hate is such a strong emotion that like you can only truly hate something that there's a little bit of love for in your heart.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, I don't know if I fully agree that part of love is hate, that like hate is intrinsic to love, but I agree that love is intrinsic to hate. Like I think, you know, it's like like skin cells are intrinsic to cancer, but not everyone has cancer type shit. You know what I mean? But like, no, 100%. I mean, you can't hate something unless a love comes from it. But I mean, I think it is, you know, I think it can be educational to go through that time of hating the thing you love and then like coming out of it more inspired.
Yeah, for sure.
But you know, I get sad thinking about people that arrive to that spot of hating it and then just kind of like give up or like let it sit there. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, and it definitely makes you feel lucky that I've had moments of, you know, I don't know. I think that would be like, I don't think I've ever hated music.
You don't
like,
think so?
Fully. No, I don't think so. I think there have been times when I hated the existence I was living, and I think those times are probably correlated with times where I was only tunnel visioning, like focusing on music. But I don't know. I think I might just be that kind of obsessive where it's like maybe it's like a sibling or like a best friend that
That's
you like,
a great metaphor.
that you get
yeah.
sick. You know, you know each other so well that you can like pick at each other's fucking insecurities and
Yeah.
get really sick of each other. But there's still like an underlying and unconditional love that currents through it. So I don't know. I don't think I've ever like hated it. I have been like really fucking frustrated before. I have like I think, rage quitting music is a very, very, I think a lot of people can relate to like that feeling, like throwing your fucking headphones down because shit don't sound right. Like, why does my fucking snare sound like garbage? Like type shit. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've luckily, I've never had that moment of like looking music in the eye and being like, fuck you, Bob. Like it, hasn't gotten there, luckily.
Like you've never been like, I'm going to leave house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I mean, and it goes back to the first thing we were talking about. Like, I don't think I would ever stop doing it. Like, it's thankfully not like the only thing I know how to do. I sometimes get stuck like convincing myself that it's the only thing I know how to do, but it is the thing that I feel most geared towards doing and the most fulfilled, like when I'm in the process of it.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been doing it so long.
No, yeah. I mean, I've been doing it like embarrassingly long now. It would be kind of stupid to stop now.
Yeah, yeah. There's also that. That is a whole different thing. To circle back to DUI, it's interesting that you brought that up. That you like literally came up with that idea with your sister in the zoo. That's interesting to me because like I felt like on the new project, like it feels. Well, can I call the project new? What, 6 months old now? Can I call it new?
That's new enough. I mean, it came out.
January, right?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was like, did it come out in January, February? I don't fucking know. Yeah, I'd say we're getting on 6 months of it.
Okay, yeah. So the thing about DUI on that project, like it felt like an outlier on the rest of the album to me personally, because it's funny that you say like so much of the album was casual and like funny and like memey, because it's like, to me, it's like so many of the songs felt very, very personal and very, very like intentional.
Yeah.
And it's like DUI kind of felt like the outlier in that sense. It felt like the funnier and the more like lighthearted track in the track list. But was that like fully intentional? Did you want to start it off as an intro that was like a bit less like intentionally lyrical to one specific thing? Or was it like, what was the kind of the intention behind that? Was it just more of a funny song?
I would say that that thought process didn't go into like the writing of the song and the placing it first initially. Those kinds of things like to go back to the whole like I guess like lightning rod David Lynch River in the Sky thing. It's like those are things that I think I more latch onto when I recognize them rather than like having them in my head from the inception of the thing. But it was kind of like I wrote that like when I had the songs or most of the songs that I knew would end up being that EP, I knew that DUI went first just because I knew it went first. It was one of those things where like, if this doesn't go first, like where the fuck am I going to put this? Like, but I like that it also, and I'm stoked that you recognize that as well, that it kind of like is a lot more lighthearted compared to like what comes next.
Yeah.
I mean, even the more serious songs on there, like, like there's songs like Sober is like a pretty, dour and serious throughout song. And I like the idea of just this really goofy, fucked up meme song kind of priming you for moments that are really vulnerable. Because if you hear that and then just, walk away at that song, like that's fine. Like I think you got I think that song in its humor and in the production style and melodic style and as a piece of music, like I'm cool with somebody hearing that and that being their perception of me as an artist. I think like it, all the things that I would want to give somebody in a first impression like exist in that song. But for those that like stick around and listen to the whole project, like I thought once it became clear that that was how it was gonna flow based on the track list I had, I liked the idea of using it to prime people for moments that were like more vulnerable, because it makes those moments later like stick out a lot more.
Oh, for sure.
But even those vulnerable moments, I think their very existence next to a song like DUI or even songs like Gum too, like the second track, like it kind of makes a meme of those serious moments too. It's like I think the big meme,
there's like a duality there. Yeah,
like the big meme I had in my head around the time where I was getting ready to put it out, well, I was chatting to some friends about this. Cause do you know a band called Fear of Making Out? They're from Arizona.
I know of them because my friend who I interviewed a long time ago, he's named Pariah Pete.
Oh, you know Pariah Pete?
Yeah, I interviewed Pariah Pete
Legend.
like years ago. Yeah, fucking that guy's a legend, man.
Shout out fucking Pariah Pete.
Shout out
this goes out to you.
Pete, man.
He's so nice.
I have not seen that dude in so long.
I see him sometimes. Like, I have a lot of friends in that Tempe scene. Like, Fear of Making Out are like some of my
they're
best friends.
super fire.
They are.
I've never met him or anything, but I'm just fans of their music.
They are the future. Like, I think, I don't know. I'm gonna make a big bloated statement, but I think like if you are a band and you know like in the sense of like when people just look at you first impression and it's like okay like X amount of people with guitars, like if you are a band and you're not being creative like in like not that like you have to sound like them, but if you're not approaching creativity like at the level that they are, I think that you are a fucking dinosaur. Like they are I could go on about how cool their music is forever and like what they are as a band, but fucking yeah, Tempe scene is goated. It's so cool.
Low key, yeah. I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like they're kind of coming up. Like,
I don't know what's in the water over there, but yeah,
it's
I mean,
sick,
like
though.
you have like FOMO, you have like there's so much variety. Like you have bands like FOMO, you have artists like Pariah Pete, you have like Saya, who's like amazing, also a good friend of mine. You know, like there's bands like Breakup Shoes too that like
Breakup Shoes is super fire.
Fill that like indie role, but like still bring something to it, and like they're like
but they're fun. Like I was like a fan of Breakup Shoes before a lot of those Tempe bands, and like they're super sick. I saw them live at Bottom of the Hill with Carpool, like fucking. Like I guess like 2 years ago now, but I've listened to Breakup Shoes forever. They're really fun. Like they're like, and I think you're right. They kind of provide that other side, you know. Yeah. It's like where their music is a bit more on like the traditional like like indie pop lens, but it's like it's still like very much like it feels like them.
They can be like on an indie pop bill, but like most of the time they're headlining and they're headlining for a reason.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Yeah, like when I was in Fashion Jackson, like for the longest time, it's like they were one of the they still are like one of the big fucking bands in that scene, and I think it speaks to Tempe too. Like there's something in the water over there where no one's just doing the style of music that other people would box them into like exactly on the nose. But damn, you got me like ranting about Tempe. I just think that scene is so cool.
It's like very interesting too. Have you been there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was there recently. I'm working on an album right now, and I was with Jacob Kellen from FOMO, who's like the producer and the drummer, cool. And he's we were mixing and we're gonna start mastering it soon. But yeah, I was out there just kind of vibing at his house, and I think I forgot what I was like originally talking about when we got to Tempe. I think it was
me neither. But can I ask you a follow-up question from that?
No, absolutely.
So it's interesting that like you say that, and tell me if I'm talking about like the past too much. I don't really like. I fully understand if like you want to talk more about your new stuff. But
oh no,
like,
you're good. I'll talk about anything.
Okay, cool. But like on that note, like when you talk about bands like Fear of Making Out and that Tempe scene that are kind of doing things that like are very very unique to them. That's kind of how I always felt about Fashion Jackson in the world that like you guys really existed in like a very 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 hard to pin down world from a genre lens, and it's like I still feel that way about like your new stuff, like your new project. It's like I'm sure like the core somebody be like, oh, it's hyperpop, but then you listen deeper and it's like a lot of the songs aren't really it's hard to pin down. And I felt like Fashion Jackson, that's always how I felt about you guys. So I would ask you, like, was that like really intentional? Like when you were sitting down to write a song, would you be like, we want this to sound like nothing else?
I think like yes and no. I mean, like we would definitely like stop if something sounded too much like something that we'd heard like out in the wild. That's interesting. But I mean, like I think it just came from, like obviously we eventually as a band, like when we were doing it a bunch and stuff, like we ended up like pretty regular like in a certain scene. But I think that just came from us like not coming up in a scene or coming up as like outsiders of a scene. Like, when we started in San Diego, it's like there was a certain sound and a certain style that was like really popular.
But you guys weren't it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's not what we made authentically. Like, we fucked with a lot of that music, but it wasn't not to the point where we would be like, okay, we're gonna drop everything and like do this style because it's what will get us to the top of like the Soma lineup the fastest.
Yeah.
We were listening, like especially around like I think we really started getting serious about songwriting as a band like 2017, and we were listening to so much different shit at that time, and the stuff that was really moving us and inspiring us to want to go write songs was not a lot of what was popular in the scene. So I think we just kind of cultivated like an identity and a songwriting methodology just around, you know, it's the same thing that I do now in my solo music. Like everything I do method wise, you know, is stuff I learned in that band, you know,
so
or habits I built in that band. Cause it's like, we came up making music just simply on the pretense of like, will it scratch the lizard brain? Like, do we finish playing this in the practice space and go like, oh fuck, like that's, you know, that was always
like, does it excite you?
Yeah. Like do we, I don't know. It's hard to pin down, but I think everyone who makes music or art can speak to their version of it. Like, there's a feeling you get when you know, also going back to that, like being a lightning rod for an idea thing. Like, there's a feeling you get when a great idea or something you feel like is a great idea passes through you. And, you know, especially when you get the chance to do that in a group of people where it's amplified by multiple people, like being in a band, it's so fucking undeniable. And I'm hiccuping off the yerb, but and you can, like, you all just can kind of look at each other and like know it's like seeing like a fucking UFO or something. It's like, you know, and knowing that everyone next to you just saw a UFO too. Yeah. You don't, like, you know, no one's gonna be the one to be like, oh my god, that was a flying saucer. But you all can kind of just sit.
But
and,
you feel it,
because you all know what it is. And I think like chasing that feeling is, you know, it was the thesis statement as much as I could make it for like how I tried to approach being in that band. You know, like obviously it gets complicated when you're in groups of people and like there's personal dynamics, of course, and yada. And you know, like I wasn't always the best at that, but it's something that I still try to keep like central now. It's the thing that still kind of like remained a constant, and it's the thing that like doesn't let me down. Like if I get just that feeling from making a song, I know it's good.
It's like chasing that feeling.
Yeah.
Chasing that thing inside of you that's almost so unique that it's like impossible to pin down or like put a name to.
But you also know that it's like universal. I don't know.
For sure.
It's kind of funny. Like, and I found that, you know, I'm distractible as shit. Like I forget this all the time. I have to remind myself of this like twice a week probably. But it's like, I'll get distracted and start worrying about other shit or like forget. I'll feel like I need to be chasing like this career thing or like this accomplishment or like getting this thing done instead of like the feeling. And then like, you know, shit will just be going like terribly and I'll feel like a just massive piece of garbage for like my entire week because I'm just like not, you know, doing shit the way that I can and should be doing it. But like as soon as like I sit down for a couple hours in front of my computer to like make stuff or like even just play guitar for a bit and like, you know, I get that feeling. It's always just the most, you know, staunch reminder of like, oh yeah, like that's why you should be doing it because of that.
That's beautiful.
It's just fun. It's fun and it keeps it simple.
I think we went on the tangents we were talking about.
Because we started talking about Tempe. Because you brought up Pariah P.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because you said, do you know if you're making out? Because we're talking about DUI.
I remember. Okay, no. Well,
that's right. Yeah.
We were talking about like the, you know, starting it off with like a really goofy song and then having that precipitate.
Yes, exactly.
Having that precipitate vulnerable moments on there. And I remember, and this was the same conversation where I decided to call that project Music 2 also, because me and the members of Fear of Making Out and a couple other folks were in Tempe in like August, like last week of July, first week of August. We were doing this writing camp at an Airbnb for an artist named Felix.
Cool, yeah.
I don't know if you know, there's this hip hop group out of Brockton, Massachusetts called Van Buren Records. Who are if you haven't heard of them, they're amazing. Like they
out
put
of Brockton.
Out of Brockton, they say Boston a lot sometimes, but they like rep Brockton. Like that's where they're from, and they're just such a great group. They dropped like one of my favorite fucking rap albums last year. It's called DSM. But a couple, you know, all the members of that group also have various solo endeavors, and one of the members named Felix kind of tapped FOMO and their manager to like organize a writing camp for he was doing these I don't want to like give away too much of like what he's doing because it's not really like my place, but working on some projects and kind of wanted to tap us to help, you know, finish producing them and like come up with new stuff. And like so we spent we did like 12 songs over the course of like 5 days, like most irregular fucking sleep schedule, like ridiculous fucking amazing experience that I would relive like 500
That's
million
beautiful.
times over. But at the end of this week, when we were packing up the Airbnb, we were like so fried, so tired, like had not slept, had eaten like a tiny amount of shrooms like at like 4 a.m. while packing shit up. So we were
Combination for a great conversation.
we were just fucking goofy, and we're all cackling. And you know, one of the subjects we'd been talking about, and they ended up naming their last project like after this meme. But have you seen those ones where it's like, oh, like I'm not joking, I'm not serious, I'm like a secret third thing? You know what I'm talking about?
No, but
and it'll be like a fucking like super realistic picture of like a wolf sitting under a tree like that, like, you know. And I think that was, you know, we were talking
You're
about.
so tapped in with the meme
I
world.
love memes, but we were talking about that meme like so much that week, and kind of how we each wanted to embody it like in our own way and in our writing, because like I think when you embody that as an ethos, like it keeps you from keeping yourself like too serious, or from taking yourself too seriously, because you are joking kind of to an extent at all times, but then it's like even at your most serious, you're not like totally serious. Like I think, you know, like I'm the least in a position to be objective about like whether or not like my music like lands or not. Like that's up to whoever listens to it. But the moments on that EP that to me land in the, you know, the ones in the more serious realm that land in the way I want them to, are like do so in a way that makes them almost kind of funny for being so serious. Can
I have this weird question, but can I ask you what moments those are for you? Because I'm curious if they're the same for me.
Definitely sober. I mean, there's that one line where it's
because
like,
I mean, you wrote them.
yeah.
I'd be curious if like there, because I have like there's a song specifically that I think resonated with me and like made me think the most on the project, and I'm curious if it's not like the ones that mean the most to you. So.
Okay, I'll give you the example in my mind that sort of speaks to that. It would be the lyric in Sober, where it's the second verse, the like, take me back to the menagerie, my God, I miss it. Fuck, I like can never remember my own lyrics. They told me when I got older I'd get it out my system. Now I'm too deep in the river, or too deep down the river, too far down the river to behave animalistically. I wish to live aquatically. I'll take this broken bottle and carve myself some gills so I can breathe under the water. I'd rather blow my head off than end up like how my father did. Paint a pretty picture on the motherfucking walls with it. When they find me, I hope my gray matter goes with the interior. Like that shit is so
that's beautiful,
unnecessary, and like so serious to the point of it being cringe.
But
like
so
in
real.
my opinion, I mean, I was feeling it. Like I did like cry after I wrote that, which is also kind of cringe. But like, you know, what happens.
Why is that cringe? Why is that cringe?
I like know that I say cringe in a very like self-forgiving way.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
We could go into another meme of like, you know.
I was gonna say, don't hate yourself because you cry.
No, not at all, not at all.
Crying's a beautiful thing.
No, I love it. I should cry more, honestly.
Me too.
But you know, like there's another meme to cite, right? Like, kill not the part of you that is cringe, but the part that cringes. Like, I love the part of myself that's cringe. I just also still, I have leftover nuggets of this need to identify it when I see it, even though it's not like super necessary.
I feel it.
But yeah, I mean, like that moment is so. I guess, you know, if I'm being objective, it's so dramatic. It's so like oversharing and like, oh shit, like. What is this bitch talking about? And it exists like on the same album as fucking like the You Should Drive Drunk song. Like I think there's a novelty to that, and I like the push and pull that exists between those two things. Like I want to be the kind of artist that can, you know, make something out of just sheer goofy fucking stupid amusement, but then also like say what I am feeling and what I'm thinking, even if it's like kind of dark or like not something that you would like admit to others in casual conversations like outside of therapy, you know? So I mean that I guess was like a moment that I could speak to on that record. I mean, there's parts on like the actual song, the song music too, which I
was gonna say, like, I feel like lyrics from that song are probably what stick with me the most.
Hell yeah. No, I mean that song was cool. Like that was an exercise in only going with my first instinct for everything. So every piece of that song is there is nothing that had thought go into it. if that makes sense.
So it was like first intuition.
Yeah,
Boom.
like
do
first
this.
everything. It's
first drums, first melody, whatever. Just going with it.
Literally everything, like the beat switch, the
That's
fucking
so
like
interesting.
There's one moment where like I was hanging out with my brother, and my brother like put a synth on the like the part where it's like hitting you with the word music.
Yeah.
There's a little synth like that was like the only meditated part of that song, but that was by another person. So
Is there a Minecraft sample in that song?
There might be. Like, which part are you talking? I forget what the exact samples are.
Like
but
at the end, I swear to God, there's a Minecraft sample.
there's that because the ending, it's a trap beat. There's like a rim in there. There's like a hi hat. There's the main sample in that is the phrase "alone" and "leave me alone" from the preceding section. But oh no, I think I know what you're talking about. I think that's either a Minecraft sample or it might just be like a splice loop that I pitched to the right key.
That just happened to sound like a Minecraft sound.
Well, because there is a vibe of Minecraft sounds, you know what I mean?
Oh,
There's
hell
that kind
yeah.
of synthy, like, it's like not quite 8-bit because the texture is smoother.
Yeah.
But I think I know what you're talking about.
Almost like Swedish techno, like C418 core.
Kinda. I don't know if I'm familiar with like I'm not very well versed in that kind of core, but if that's what it evokes, then like yeah. You know?
That song to me, it felt like a lot of the lyrics and a lot of like the direction of that song to me kind of felt like it was like you questioning like what is the, I'm trying to remember the specific lyric. It's like, I've been doing this for a while, I think I would know, right?
Oh yeah, I've been here a while. I think I would know.
I've been here a while, I think I would know. Like to me, what that felt like was like other people questioning you making music, and then it was like you kind of explained like you've been here, like I've been down this road before. You know what you're doing. You know where these roads lead. That I feel like that's not even how you wrote it, but that's kind of how I interpreted it personally.
Okay, cool. No, that's actually really interesting because that's like maybe that wasn't the initial way that I like or the intention that I wrote it with, but I think it's cool that it can be interpreted in that way. The intention behind it, I think, was kind of, and I do this a lot. It's in a lot of like the older Fashion Jackson songs too, like to the point where it almost like feels like a trope in my writing.
Yeah.
But I'll do things where I sort of just like throw self-awareness out the window and just I'll sing stuff in a way that's really like closed-minded and bratty to like kind of shit on myself for being that way. It's like,
that's interesting.
I think what I had, because that whole thing is kind of just like a collage, that song, like there's not a narrative. Like I don't think in the lyric I was saying that as a response to any other lyric that came before it, but the attitude that I had in mind when I was recording it was sort of like, you know, maybe someone trying to point out something about your life or something that you're doing or something that you need to change that's like probably really important, or even just trying to give you good insight or advice or like make you aware of something you're ignoring. But then you're like, oh no, like I've been here a while, like I think I would know, like you don't I don't need you to tell me, or like blah 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 blah. And that was like that sort of like I think pretentiousness is the wrong term, but that stubbornness, that like stubbornness is what I had like on my tongue recording that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it can come off like other ways too. I think it's cool.
Well, it's an interesting thing too, because like I think that concept's really weird, and it's really like it's kind of like a balance to learn. Because the thing is, it's like, I think if you think you're the smartest person in every room, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And I think
always.
if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you also have a lot of like ego you need to work on, but simultaneously, like I think there's some rooms where you have to have enough confidence to understand that like your opinion should hold weight in this room. Like what you say shouldn't be dismissed. I want to show you my lock screen. It's like, so it says, speak confidently as if you're right.
Hell yeah.
And then you open it and it says, but listen carefully as if you're wrong.
Okay, word.
So that's kind of the lens that I think about that. And it's like, I think you have to have enough self-awareness to understand when you're speaking to somebody who you can learn something from, but you also have to understand like your opinions hold weight and you're not an idiot and everything that you say matters. You know, it's like, it's like the give and take from like learning and willing to like be schooled almost.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like that distinction kind of ties into what we were talking about a little earlier about like that feeling that you get when something is right upon like creating art, right? Like, you know, I think that feeling for the, you know, like obviously it's not going to have a perfect track record, but I think a lot of the time that, you know, when you're going into those rooms under the pretense of like doing things or discussing things around creating or art or yada yada, like that feeling I think will generally govern pretty well like the moments in which you should, be open and listening, and then the moments in which you should like advocate and stand by the confidence of your ideas,
Yeah.
Because that feeling doesn't really lie to you. Like, when
100%.
when something's a little half baked, and when you're, like, even if you don't want to admit it, like, you at least subconsciously know when something's like half baked, and the person next to you, like in this room, like probably has a good, gauge on how to make it sound better, or maybe even if it's just not the thing you should be pursuing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you also know when it's like, nah, like, that gave me the feeling, like, I know it's weird, but like, we should go with this. Like, trust me.
I'm trying to remember where I read this recently, but what was it? It was like an anecdote that like perfectly. I'm trying to remember where I read this. I can't remember where I read this, but it was this guy writing about how like it was fucking Bill Burr, the comedian.
Okay, yeah.
I saw this like really old article that he had written, and he was talking about like when he was like an upcoming comedian and like just failing time and time again. And he would talk about how like he'd go to the comedy clubs and he would try to like perform or whatever, and nobody would fucking show up, and like it'd just be an epic failure or whatever. And then he would go home, and like the girlfriend he was with at the time, he'd be so happy when he like performed and nobody showed up, and she never understood why. And he said he'd always like he'd get home from doing one of these gigs, and he would do this like dance around his kitchen, and his girlfriend would be like, "Why are you so happy? Like nobody showed up." And then he would explain why he's happy. He's like, I love this more than anything else in the world. Mm-hmm. And then she'd be like, wow, like I wish I had something that made me so happy failing. Like I don't even have anything that makes me so happy succeeding. Mm-hmm. But I found that interesting because it's like, I don't even know where I was going with that, but it's like, I think you need something that you love that much, like you need something that you love like that entirely much to where like you can fail at it and it makes you that happy. Like it drives you that much. Like it's just a feeling, kind of what you were talking about. It's like when you get that feeling, it's like that you're doing the right thing, whether or not it's being received.
No, exactly. Because that feeling transcends like any sort of, I guess, like audience reception towards it. Like, that feeling is going to lead you to where you want to go eventually. Mm-hmm. It may be more than what your threshold of patience is, and I think that's where like a lot of people like give up or quit or stop. And that I don't think that speaks to like a lack of discipline or like like any undesirable character trait, right? It's like like some people just fucking like it really tests the boundaries of their patience and they just like can't fucking do it anymore, which like respect, like I get that. But yeah, like I mean I firmly believe that if you whether you're an artist or not, like if you just do anything that gratifies you in the way that we're talking about, like music for us right now, right? Like, and you follow that feeling, like it will take you to somewhere that you will be hyped on and that will be like sustainable and beautiful and like really gratifying if you just like stick it out. Like
that's super key, I think.
Know. And it's like also like happiness isn't a destination either.
True.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like a fluctuating state of being. Like it's not like I don't know, like I think also we as artists, like it's probably good for us to try to get out of that mindset of like, oh, like we'll do X, Y, and Z and then we'll be happy, or then we'll be successful, or then we'll be this. So key. It's like I'm
such a victim of that. I've done that my whole life.
Same.
And it's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, I mean I do it like multiple times like a day. I probably like did it in the car on the way here. You know what I mean? Like fucking you will be happy and feel successful relatively to where you're at, like at different times, and then you'll feel like a walking like piece of fucking garbage. Like I oscillate.
Oh, for sure.
So, and like I haven't even like attained like any sort of like, what's it called? Quantifiable like career success in the way that like I have in my head, right? But like there are moments in like, just creating and like the things I've been lucky enough to do so far that like I have felt like happy and successful in what I do in those moments because of the gratification. And then I've also felt like that meme of like fucking Goofy where it's like, damn bitch, you live like this. Like I look at like my room all messy and shit, and it's like my surroundings are disgusting. So yeah, I mean, like I think it oscillates. I try to not think of happiness or success as a destination, but something that I can achieve and reside within like fairly consistently and sustainably.
Yeah, 100%. I read this poem by Zach Bryan recently, and he wrote down this thing where he said like I try to not. It was pretty much he was saying like pretty much exactly what you're talking about. It's like I've learned that success is not the next thing that I conquer, but rather it's perfect because or he said like, but rather it's right now because every moment is enough. I think that is like the key to like well-being. One of the very important lessons that I think you can learn in life, and something that I'm trying to learn. And it goes back to what we were talking about. It's like you can consciously know things, but to practice them is a whole different thing. It's like I'm really trying to like teach myself that every moment is enough, and it's like whatever you want in the future. It's great to think about that. Like it's great to want things. It's great to have goals, but it's like you have to accept every moment for what it is and accept that it's enough and love where you are and learn to love the people around you and your surroundings and kind of what you were talking about earlier, like embracing that journey, like being okay with the fact that like if you want to get to really where you want to be, it's like it's incredibly difficult, but you can't be destination focused. You have to like be so grateful for like that journey. And it's like, that is, I think is how you really find happiness in the moment.
Well, cause also like, I mean, I don't know, like I feel like it's like a corny thing to bring up, but like time isn't linear. Like we
Very
as,
much so, yeah.
we as like 3-dimensional human beings, like perceive it as like this straight line that there are points like throughout because, like that's just how our brains like perceive and compartmentalize time. But it really like, we are kind of just like we're living in just a present moment that's like gonna continue after, because of like birth and death, we have this very linear perception of it. But for fucking this shit all just continues after. Like it's kind of just a big right now. So like I think tapping into it as and I don't want to run the risk of like coming off like I think I'm knowing what I'm talking, like I know what I'm talking about because I don't. Like this is just stuff that interests me to think about in this way. But yeah, I mean, like per what you're saying, I think you can find a lot more sustainable happiness like in the moment if you're thinking of it as just like the moment right now, like the big right now, as opposed to like down the line on this like quantifiable timeline, I will have this and that. Because I mean, like the first thing we brought up in this conversation is like how toxic that's been for both of us.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, it's also an anecdote to think about. Like, I think one thing I realized recently is like the most impactful people in the world and the people that change the world in the best ways, they never think about changing the world in the best ways. Like you think like the most positive people that have implemented the best like political and social change, I don't think those people wake up and like, I'm going to change the world. I think they wake up with like a small goal or a small mission to help their surrounding community, their people around them, Yeah. And it's like eventually those things translate and they like compile into like these huge changes, but it's like I don't think you can think about them in that way. It's like I think for a large portion of my life I'd wake up every day and I'm like, I'm gonna change the world, I want to help so many people, but it's like it's not a sustainable way to live your life.
You don't make the whole ripple by dropping the rock in the pond. Like you drop the rock in the pond and it makes that first little splash and the splash makes the ripples, you know what I mean? You can't really like envision the whole fucking thing and create it in that moment, but like I think some of us, whether it be like enacting social change or like making art that's like really impactful to a lot of people, or like any sort of thing that makes any sort of larger impact. I mean, I agree. I think it comes less from a decision to like change the world as it does from making a decision to like change something, and the ripple effects from that decision ultimately have like bigger implications.
Oh yeah, 100%. So to kind of circle back a little bit, talking about like Music 2 as a project, it very much like feels super cohesive to me. Like it feels like all these songs are very much meant to go together. So I want to ask you, like, were they all written with the intention to go on one project? And kind of a piggybacking question off of that, was there a lot that was cut from this project? Like, were there a lot of songs that you made in this time period that didn't end up on the project?
Yeah, there were a good amount that ended up being cut, which is really funny because I never had that happen before. Like I think in FJ, like the couple records that we done, it was like there was never like, oh, we finished like more songs than are gonna go on here, and then these ones are cutting room floor, and these ones are gonna make it on. It was pretty much like we made our records as we went, and like the songs that we created in that time period became like those records. Whereas like with this, I had a long time of like working on the project in my head that was gonna be like my first EP or whatever, and there were a lot of songs. There was one point where it was going to be like a completely different project than it turned out to be. I think the The only song that was always going to be on there was Make Believe, like the little interlude in the middle. That's the oldest one. Like that was going to be like I wrote that in my brother's room at like his old apartment in like over quarantine and stuff. Like I came to visit him. He was living up here. And, you know, he had computer speakers in a room.
That makes, I'm like piecing together context because you say you're 23 in that song and that makes sense. Yeah.
Or I might have been 20. Yeah, I know. I guess I would have been 23 because I'm 26. Maybe I was 24 at the time. I don't know.
That's interesting. So that song's pretty old.
It was pretty old. I was not 25 yet. So I was probably 24. I think I said 23 because it rhymed.
Okay.
But, yeah, what's it called? That was the oldest one. And that I just sort of, it had that feeling of like, it had, you know, like, not that I think it's like necessarily comparable, but the feeling I got from that was the same that like contextually I would get from like a Tyler or like a Frank kind of interlude. I was like, okay, this feels like the middle of something. And so I sort of kept that in my pocket. Then there was a point where like I almost pulled the trigger on finishing it and like putting it out, but like it was like that and then just like whole different song. I think there was still like 6 besides that it was going to be. But like sort of, it was like I wrote DUI, or no, I wrote Sober after Make Believe. Sober was the first one. And I wrote that with Sterling from Fashion Jackson plays bass on that. Like we were living in the same house and we kind of made that like outside of like band stuff, just like to make something for fun. And I thought that song was good enough to put out in any form. So that was kind of like in the back of my head. And then when I had... and you know, like for a while it was like that and Make Believe and like a couple other random ones. And then I had DUI and Gum I probably wrote at a pretty similar time. And then, you know, I just kept kind of subbing out old songs that weren't as good for the new ones I was writing.
That's interesting.
And then, you know, I think by the time, because the last 2 I wrote were Coffee and Cell Phone. Okay. I kind of wrote those in the same span of a couple days. I think I wrote like Cell Phone over 2 days, and then I made Coffee. No, it was Cell Phone, Coffee, and Music 2, I think was the order I did those in. Music 2 was actually the last one. And yeah, I mean, at that point, it was sort of just like, you know, and I think this is why I ended up making Music 2 on that, like, oh, I'm just going to use my instinct basis. Like, because, you know, at a certain point, I felt like I was tapped into, like, what the record I was making was going to be. So it was, you know, I wasn't like on purpose sitting down being like, I'm going to make a new song for this EP today. It just kind of ended up being like what happened. Yeah. So, you know, when you tunnel vision on a project for X amount of time and you like live in the identity of it, even if you can't necessarily like state it in a clear cut, high concept thesis statement, like what it is, there's a vocabulary you kind of gravitate to. Like, you know, for this one, it was a style of like blending like, you know, hip hop production with like, there's a lot of like, you know, which is kind of funny because like if you go off DUI, it's like the least prevalent, I think in the first 2 songs, but there's like a lot of acoustic guitar on that EP. Yeah. And like that was kind of a touchstone that I was using in those last like days of writing as well. Like all 3 of those songs, Cell Phone, Coffee, and Music 2 are all built around acoustic guitar. And so I feel like I'm tangenting. I forget like what the initial question was. My bad.
Me too. But on that note, I was gonna ask you too. Like, so since you come from like an instrumental background, like, were most of the songs like on this record written from an like organic instrumental point, or you as a producer were they written more from like a behind the keyboard stance?
There's kind of like I think at that point, like carrying into now, there's not a lot of distinction. It's kind of like it's a hybrid. You know, I come from playing piano and guitar and like composing shit in that way, but my whole wheelhouse of, you know, creating records comes from producing. Yeah. I know that sounds like a really boneheaded way to say it, but like, like, I mean, you know, it's 2 different wheelhouses that combine into whatever my little method is. But it would be like, you know, like when I wrote Coffee, I remember I woke up and just had that guitar riff in my head. And like there was a guitar sitting next to my bed, so I kind of just like...
Does that happen to you a lot?
Not like a ton.
That's really cool.
That was a lucky moment. That happened from like I had been working on music every day for like a week, so
your brain's there.
I woke up like this and was like, fuck it.
I woke up like this.
Fucking woke up in this shit. I don't know. I had something funny in my head that I forgot. But yeah, that was kind of just like, okay, I'm like already in this mode and there's a guitar here and I woke up like 10 seconds ago and there's this riff, so I'm just gonna like put it down. And I thought it was cool that it was in like 6/8 because that song's in a waltz time, which is kind of deceptive because there's like a trap beat under it. But I had the guitar riff. I put it down. A tool that I use a lot in my music, mostly for vocals, is like Verispeed on Logic. That's how I kind of get my voice to sound like girlier.
What's Verispeed?
Free game, and I want to shout out.
Is that a plugin?
It's a stock plugin, which is beautiful. And real quick, I want to shout out Laura Less from 100 Gex.
Oh, shout out Laura Less.
Literally,
legend.
Fucking icon. I could go on about how awesome she is for like the length of a whole other podcast.
She's also like one of the funniest people I've ever seen live.
She's so funny. I mean, they're amazing live. I got to I got to meet her recently, which was
so cool.
insane because I went to their boiler room.
Oh,
and
sick!
I'm such a fucking fangirl. I felt like so cringe and awkward like going into this, but and this ties into what we're about to talk about. But I learned about this method of pitching up your voice like from her, like watching her, not directly because I don't know her like that, but from watching like an interview. And so it was like I went up to her after their set and I was like, hey, like, I just want to thank you for putting people onto Logic Verispeed because that shit like fucking changed my life. And then we had this whole just like kind of geeky nerd out session
That's
over
so
like,
cool.
oh, like fucking that shit is like the game. And it's like, yeah, like we're talking about just like
the way her and Dylan produce the records are
so
like, it's
fucking
fucking, it's like mind blowing. Yeah.
I hope to one day have the chance to pick their brains like further about
That'd be beautiful.
It was enough for me just to like, you know, be able to go up to somebody I respect like that and be like, hey, like, you know, this offhanded thing you said in an interview changed the way I make music, and I love music so much, and I love y'all's music because it is so clearly and contagiously made by people that also love music. I'm doing a spiel. But anyway, shout out Laura Less, Verispeed, which is, so basically it's kind of emulating a thing that exists on tape machines.
Okay.
Which is if you slow or speed up like the whole song on tape, it's going to pitch it up and down. So if you slow the song down, it brings the pitch down. And like, I mean, like pitched up and down vocals, I think like, especially in a post like Brockhampton musical landscape,
I'm glad you said that.
It's
so
kind
true,
of it's a mainstay of production now.
For
like
sure.
Everyone's pitching their voice all over the place because
Blonde really made that shit like it. Yeah, crazy.
We're still on the post Blonde wave.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
But I noticed that a lot of people, you know, the way they'll do it is using a plugin like Little Altar Boy, where if you're singing a melodic line, the only way to pitch up your voice and maintain the same notes you're singing in the take, like musically, is to put it up an octave.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you have to go up 12 whole tones to have the same melody. And like for me, it's like my comfortable range of singing is in my mid-range. So if I'm singing right here, it's the most comfortable. And if I try to go lower, I used to be able to go lower, but I can't anymore. Then my voice starts to sound like really awkward. And so like to get like a more effeminate voice in the way that I want with like a plugin like Little Altar Boy, I would have to sing really low and then pitch that up to where I want it to be. And then that just didn't result in a good performance because like I'm singing in a voice that like I don't fucking talk in. Like, I'm trying to sing down here and it just doesn't sound really good. Whereas with Verispeed, what you can do is you slow the whole song down. And then it's extra cheating because you also like the song's slower. So in your performance, you have time to like think about the inflections. Yeah. But it slows it down and pitches it down. So I would slow
So you're recording it slower than it's outputting.
And I do this on like every song that I make. There's like some part probably with Verispeed on it. I do it a little less now because I'm trying to be a little more confident in how my voice sounds like naturally. This was like also just like early transition. Like I hate everything about myself that's perceivably masculine. So I was like, I want my voice to sound girlier. And I love like how this, you know, how like those Gex records sound. Like her voice sounds like fucking, it's like, you know, chip-tuned and pitched up, but it's beautiful. Like
I sound like a big when I'm talking to you.
It's so like fucking good. And so using Verispeed allows me to slow the song down and pitch it to a point, like I'll just, like my golden ratio is like, usually if I slow it down by 20 to 30%, then depending on what key I write the song in, it'll be in a key where I can now sing it in my mid-range. And then so when I speed it back up, instead of like having to sing down here and then pitch it all the way up so I can sing how I want to, I can just sing it how I want to normally.
Yeah.
And then when I speed it back up and pitch it back up, it's in that like more effeminate or perceivably feminine range. And it has this extra sassy quality. It's a lot smoother. Like you get these digital artifacts because it's almost kind of like a weird like mathematical paradox. Like if you're pitching stuff around without altering the timing, you get these weird like artifacts because it's, you know, to my understanding, it's like the plugin having to make up for that thing not being changed.
Yeah.
Whereas like the way that I guess like mathematically you're supposed to do it is with the speed. So you get this really like smooth texture to it that sounds like so natural. And like it has that chipmunky quality. But then sometimes even like I'll put Altar Boy like on that vocal if it like let's say that I have to make the song 30% slower to sing it comfortably.
Yeah.
But then like 30% for me is where usually I'll speed it up and then it'll sound kind of chipmunky. So like if it comes out kind of chipmunky and like less just like girl, then I'll put Altar Boy on it and then just put the formant down till it sounds like more of a person. And then that's how I get that sound.
Now, is all that to change like the quality of your voice, or is a lot of that to? Because what's interesting to me is like, have you played any of these songs live yet?
A little bit. I did one show kind of like as like sort of as a test run, but also for fun. Wait, also a question. Since we're just like filming this, is it okay if I go pee real quick?
Yeah, go pee.
I have to pee so bad, and honestly, like my mom has given me shit about this like my whole life. Like when I have to pee, my thoughts are so fragmented, and I can't pay attention.
Go pee. Take a piss break. We're good.
I'm gonna piss. It's this yurt. Makes you have to pee.
Sponsored by Yerb.
Sponsored by you. Thank you.
Give us that Yerb sponsorship, to be honest.
That sponsorship. I'm gonna try to knock anything over. Not knock anything over.
Yeah, it's like a fucking minefield, dude.
That's awesome.
It's tough in here.
Thank you for accommodating my bladder.
Of course. I'm surprised I don't have to pee. I almost always have to pee, bro. Right, dude. The white shirt looks so cool with the fucking old posters now. Huh? Oh yeah. Which light? I'm sorry. Oh yeah. The middle one? Yeah. Oh, you can't lower that one. Oh, you mean like lower it? Like put it lower?
Like make it less in frame.
Oh.
Maybe back it up. Try backing it up like into the desk.
Into the desk?
Like into this desk. Like yeah. You feel me? Yeah, beautiful. I like this angle so much more now. Oh my god. Wait, a little bit more. The top right is still in the frame. A little bit. Okay. Dude, this is where this light lives now. Okay. Sounds good. Because now we can see your hands on the table.
Oh yes. Hand thirst traps. You right, brother. You are right, brother.
Would it be unprofessional to take a little?
No.
No?
Just take it here.
You go grab it.
I've returned from the Holy Land.
The holy land of the piss.
I have peed up.
Peed up a goddamn storm.
Peed up a storm, a torrential downpour.
Torrential downpour.
I made a song with a pee sample the other day.
What?
I mean, just a splice one. I didn't record.
Oh, I thought you were recording yourself peeing.
No, I didn't record myself peeing. I found a splice sample, but I'll play it. I'll play it for you guys after this. I think I told Mario that I was gonna make or no, I said I was gonna play that one that me and Jake did, right?
We
I'll play you guys that after.
What'd you guys do? You sampled pissing?
No, not on that song. Well, I'd been telling Mario over Instagram that because we were talking about Jake having been come on here with you guys, and like Jake and I have a song that at some point will come out that I was going to play y'all later, but I will also play the one with the P in it. It's not my P. Maybe I will record my P. But like, yeah, I just found a Splice sample and I was like, this is funny. I have like a bridge where it's like, the song turns into like someone like taking a drunk piss while listening to like Slightly Stupid. Like I have like a Slightly Stupid sample, like chilling in the background, and then it like goes back into the verse.
Is this just me? Or do drunk pisses feel so long? Is that just me? They feel like when I piss and I'm drunk, like it feels like a third, like if it's 30 seconds, it feels like a minute and a half.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I don't know why that is, but
I can't speak like recently because I haven't taken a drunk piss in like a couple years now, but I think
So you're fully sober?
Not like fully. I mean, like I don't drink or do like hard drugs, and I am on like a sabbatical from psychedelics. I would take psychedelics
sabbatical
again. I just had like an experience with like at the end of last year that kind of like put me off it for a bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, like I don't drink. I'm just, not for any like righteous or like prestigious reason. I'm just like not a very cool person, and like just alcoholism runs in my family really bad. And mm-hmm. I saw that going to a place that I did not want to go to, or that I kind of felt like I just already been in for too long. So it's been a while, but that being
for you.
Thank you. But I mean, that being said, I have taken many lengthy drunk pisses. I didn't mean to turn that into a segue about like by not drinking. Just like I was trying to rack my brain, like fuck, it's been a while, but because I think that was also my problem.
So much longer. I don't know why.
I don't know. It's like a movie. It's like a whole like I think drunk pisses have like kind of an anime like shonen arc. Like this, there's eras to it.
This shit finna be a movie.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Every time. I'm like, even sober, every time I sit down to pee, that's what goes through my head. That's what went through my head.
It's finna be a movie.
We're making a film. Call me. I'm like Catherine Bigelow on the toilet. This is my Hurt Locker.
Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. She's making movies on the toilet. That could be your headline.
She's making movies on the toilet.
This bitch comes into the studio and makes a movie in our toilet.
She really made a movie on the toilet, though.
That'll be how we reel in these views. That's how we're gonna get people to listen to us talking for like this long.
She made a movie on toilet? Question mark?
At some point, something cinematic's gonna happen on a toilet.
Question mark? Exclamation point? 1, 2?
You won't believe this.
Gone wrong?
Oh my god. Girls Gone Wild. I don't even remember.
Playing live.
We were talking about. Oh yeah, playing live. Okay.
You said you did a test run for these songs.
Sorta. It was like a show, but like it wasn't like like a big show or anything. So I played at a brewery in Big Bear, which is
that's
super
so cool.
It was so fun. My girlfriend put it together, which was like awesome. She like kind of, because we thought it would just be really funny to throw. I mean, like there was a variety of artists on the bill. Like I wouldn't go so far as to call it like a hyperpop show or anything, and like we've talked about also like like my music isn't necessarily hyperpop, or we're not gonna go into that. I always sound pretentious trying to say my music is hyperpop.
Genre's dumb.
It doesn't fucking matter. But like anyway, off of that, like we had been joking, we're like, oh, because she was living in Big Bear at the time, and we were kind of like,
awesome.
It would be so funny to do like a hyperpop show at this brewery that has like this open mic, and we got them to agree to like let us have it. It was like a Halloween show, and it was actually pretty insane. Like it was super fun. Definitely a lot of like
so cool.
The folks from town that like weren't our friends or our age were like really confused. And definitely, I was stoked. Like more people seemed to like it than I was expecting, which was a little disappointing.
Was the crowd not like a crowd that you would think would be into that kind of music?
No, like a couple folks, yeah, but like not overwhelmingly. But anyway, because the question about playing live was translating like the pitching, because we were talking about Verispeed, like the vocals live. So honestly, this is something I want to evolve to like as I eventually play more shows. But So the way I perform live, as you know, I'm saying right now as if like I'm performing live actively, and as if that isn't the only show I've done. But my music live, like in the form.
Yeah, but it's you play hundreds of shows, just in a different context.
Mm-hmm. Like the way that my music, I guess, like is performed live right now in this iteration, is I want to expand it to having a guitar player on stage. I had a friend of mine that I asked recently if he would do guitar for me, depending on like when we can feasibly do it. But right now, it's just me and my brother on drums.
Okay, yeah.
Or my brother on drums. I'm not on drums too. I suck at drums. I'm terrible at drums. But it's so it's me like backing tracks, and like I do it like the SoundCloud way, which like I know a lot of people like to shit on, but like I just like for the most part, it's like I just fucking put the whole song on the speakers with like the vocals and the drums and like everything. Because I really like the ignorance of doing that. And there's people...
I love that.
Well, and I love when people do that and just like I think Playboy Cardi's like a great example of like doing that.
We literally had a whole conversation where like we're going to ask her about opium.
Yeah. Oh, we'll go into opium soon. But yeah, like I think the way that Cardi performs live is like the fucking apex. Like
I'm so happy you brought this up.
That was my big inspo for how I want to play live, because I mean I love that it's this high production fucking like you have like
it's a play. It is crazy.
Like you have like Metallica ass pyrotechnics.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
And like fucking, you know, crazy outfits and like a crazy vibe. Like he's got these people just like moshing, and like it's musically it's essentially a glorified listening party. Like when I was at that writing camp, the group that we were working on music for, their management was kind of around for a couple of those days, and their managers had like just seen Cardi at a festival.
Yeah.
And their big takeaway, I remember so distinctly them like
that's
talking
probably
about,
a very different experience than like you and I have had, like seeing him like
on YouTube.
No, I saw him on his tour.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. I haven't seen him live
The
yet.
crazy show. I'll give you my take on it in a second, but yeah.
Fuck yeah! Everyone I've talked to that's seen him live has like gushed over how insane of an experience he curates.
I've never ever. I've been to hundreds and hundreds of shows, but okay, finish your thought and then I'll go into my take on it.
It's fucking top tier presentation. It is like a glorified listening party. Like it's the song playing out of the speakers, but with crazy production, like a dude fucking shredding guitar solos the entire time, like on the stage,
metal power chords and
which
shit.
Is fucking awesome. Like all these crazy transitions. It's it's kind of like a DJ set with added live elements.
Yeah.
And I remember Van Buren's management, who had like just seen him at a festival before we like all came and did this thing in Arizona. They were talking about Cardi one night when we were all just kind of hanging out and like smoking and shit, and they were saying, like the biggest takeaway that was like the most awesome thing was there's all this crazy production, there's so much happening on stage, so much sound like coming at you, but in terms of like Cardi as the performer into the mic, like he doesn't say a word except for what or like screaming. And I think that's the coolest fucking shit. It's like you were coming on stage presenting your music, but you as the performer and as the central figure are merely just like the sheer character. Like can't even be bothered to be contributing musically necessarily. Although I would argue like the ad-libs do contribute musically, but in like a lead vocalist way.
In like an almost like an energy way, in my opinion.
You're just hyping up your own song, which is so fire. Like there is no greater, more like, and I say this as like a compliment, like don't get it twisted. Like there is no just more awesomely pompous way to like present your music as like the shit. When it is the shit too. Like I think Cardi's music is fucking brilliant, but like presenting it that way of like, my only contribution to the performance of this is going to be running around.
The only thing I can add to it,
and screaming what, because this so speaks for itself. Is really cool. But
and I'm really happy you're going this deep into it, because I've had so many conversations with people who just write him off. And it's like you write this off because it's simply not something you haven't seen before.
Why do they have the vocals in the backing track? Because it's fucking sick. Like, it's such a flex. Like I think, and like I don't know, like I've if you see videos of dude like in the studio, like making this stuff.
He looks manic. Like, it's crazy.
It's really intensive. Like, he puts a lot of effort and energy into making the music. And so, like
it's so intentional. Like, people think he's just like
dicking around. It's
yeah.
like, you don't, and I'm not even talking like success or money or fame wise, but like, you know, purely artistically, I don't think you reach that kind of conclusion just like sort of like you know, I think a lot of it is vibing because that's how you get your best ideas, but you don't get that way by not caring.
Of course not.
I
yeah.
think, you know, I think there's something special about, I think there's a difference between not giving a fuck and like not caring. I think you should not give a fuck in that, like, you shouldn't care about how when you're chasing, you know, like we keep talking about chasing the feeling, like when that feeling is central to what you're doing, you should not give a fuck about like who likes it or what people think of it or how it's going to be received, but you should care about that feeling. You should care about the purity of that feeling and care about like how the thing is making you feel, but don't give a fuck. And I think like Cardi, you know, obviously have not had the pleasure, don't know the guy, would love to, but he strikes me as someone that is like, he doesn't give a fuck, but he cares.
I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful. So like, I guess like what I'd been getting at earlier too was like, that was the, and you know, this shit inspired, like I said, I haven't even seen him live yet. This is all this obsessive inspiration like came from just like watching him on YouTube. Like, this is like the coolest concert concept
It's genuinely the most unique show I've ever been to.
Yeah, like I'm jealous you got to. I mean,
it's like, to me, like it felt. It was so clearly intentional, and that's why it bothers me when people write him off so easily, as if it's like, oh, it's like, it's almost like a greater. It's almost like when people write Cardi off, it's almost like a microcosm for a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And it's like the idea that people are writing off things that are so different that they think it's talentless, but it's like in reality, it's quite the opposite. Like it's so artistically intentional and so specifically curated to one specific feeling and one specific energy that it's like you're not going to understand it unless you're receptive to it. But it's to me, it's like I've never felt so much from a concert. And it's of course, like I've heard things live that obviously were far more amazing than that. It's not even sonically what I experienced that was so incredible about that experience. What was crazy about it was how it made me feel. It's not what I heard, it's what I felt.
Yeah.
And it was totally different. And it's not even just the music. Like the music was only one it was honestly a very minor aspect of like that show. It's like he pumped the entire building full of smoke. Like it felt like hell. Like you can see him I don't think I saw his face at all.
Yeah.
He's wearing like this gigantic cloak.
Yeah.
So you barely even know if it's Cardi.
Yeah.
Like I saw like all these things on Reddit or people talking about like, dude, I saw Cardi. It wasn't even Cardi.
It's like a fake Cardi. And it could be, which is also like so,
another thing.
So brilliant. And like, I mean, fuck, like that whole, I forget what I was going to say. I just get in this geeky mood when we start talking about Cardi but I mean like that experience transcending music and being like a whole thing, I think is just really cool.
What it felt like to me was, sorry to cut you off, but what it felt like to me was like the sonic embodiment of going insane.
Yeah.
That's like what it felt like. And I've been to, and this is crazy to me. I've been to so many shows and I've never been so like unable to handle something that I've left like a GA area or a floor or even a pit. But like I could not sit through the entire Cardi show.
It's unrelenting, it looks like.
I couldn't do it. I tried. The whole time I had this like big like macho energy to me. I was like, oh no, I've been to fucking so many underground hardcore shows. Like I'm not. What do you think I'm gonna do? Like dude, like I couldn't do it. Like
Cardi Pit hits different.
I couldn't do it. And maybe it was because it was at Bill Graham I saw him at.
Oh no
and
shit.
They sold shit. It was way oversold.
That was off of A Whole Lot of Red.
Yeah,
so crazy.
Yeah, Whole Lot of Red tour. But it was. I couldn't like I couldn't be the whole I got out of the like I left the GA or like went to the very back of GA like in the second to last song because I couldn't do it anymore. And it was also like the sheer length of it. He played for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I mean like that
2 hours.
I've seen like I've you know, probably slightly embarrassingly I'm a fangirl, like as you have probably gleaned from this whole conversation.
That's beautiful.
Like I've watched like the whole YouTube video of his like Whole Lot of Red like set list, and it's crushing in length. It's fucking crazy.
So long, yeah.
And his pits have always been like that, because like I mean like I lied. I have seen him once just like not off A Whole Lot of Red. I saw him in 2017 off like the self-titled.
Or self-titled.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was cool. I mean, so different. This is like Cash Cardi era. Like, man like came on stage like on time, like wearing a V-Lone hoodie to like location. So like that's the era I've seen him in.
Yeah.
The mosh pits back then though were still crazy.
Yeah,
like,
brutal.
You know,
feels like a punk show.
Yeah, exactly. It is a punk show.
Yeah, pretty
which
much.
is cool. But yeah, I think I remember the other thing I'd wanted to say too, which is like, if you look at, especially like, you know, it seems like his set really shines at festivals, especially because
interesting.
like what I love so much about seeing him on festival lineups, also as high up as he is, and like, you know, he's headlining Rolling Loud, I saw like in Miami, and like think about, you know, where he sits at the top of that lineup, and like on other festival lineups, you know, you'll probably have like a Dua Lipa or like a Post Malone at like, or like a Foo Fighters at the top, right? But he's gonna be pretty far up there.
Yeah.
And you know, this is all stuff that like, you know, a lot of it's super distinct, but the artists at like the top of the bills, it's like, you know, you become like a festival headliner because your music has just reached this point where like, to an extent, even if it's really singular and creative and unique, it can still appeal to like a broad range of people.
Yeah.
And like seeing,
which is a good thing.
Yeah. But like seeing Cardi like headline a festival like Rolling Loud, where it's like, okay, you know, this lineup is largely like the stuff that's popular to like the most amount of people, and it's gonna be largely all presented in a way that's very curated to like not piss people off,
for sure,
know? Or like, you know, not make people want to walk away from it.
Super intentional.
Having just the so hyper curated and stylized, like, you know, having a lot of acts that like, you know, share a similar aesthetic, like across, you know, whether it's a hip hop festival like Rolling Loud or like greater pop kind of stuff, like having these acts that are a lot more like, okay, this appeals to like a wider common denominator, and then, you know, at the top or near the top, like having this thing that is so specific, like, okay, this is your hyper fucking vamp, like demon trip to hell for like an hour. I think that's really cool. I love seeing that culturally, like in the place that it is now.
Oh, I agree. Cause it's so, but I guess it begs the question, like, there has to be some kind of like statistical or analytical backing to say that like that the majority of people Rolling Loud will accept it. But it's like, will they? Like I just, in my head, I can't envision like the vast majority of Rolling Loud being a fan of like going to that Cardi show, but I think they might say they're a fan of Playboi Carti because of the name Playboi Carti. But it's like when you really get into his music and you go to one of his shows, it's like you understand that like it's almost like
weird.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's almost like what he's advertising is very different from like what he's providing in a weird way. You know,
I think what's cool is like a lot of, you know, like I would think that like the majority of folks like going to like a Rolling Loud or like, let's say even he was playing like a Coachella or something, or like a Lolla type of situation.
Imagine.
It's like folks like probably know him from like his big hits. So it's like they know like the Cash Cardi stuff.
Location.
Like, they know they know like Magnolia, like Woke Up Like This. They might know like one song off like Dial It or something.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, they understand him in the context of like on playlists going the songs that go next to like other songs that you've heard like a bunch of times.
like a song that could be next to an Uzi song and it wouldn't bat an eye.
I love just the idea of someone like, you know, going to a festival, seeing Cardi's the headliner, and expecting your kind of generic festival headliner type set, like whether or not they like it. And I think what's cool is when someone like Cardi is in front of that broad of an audience, a big amount of people are going to hate it. But that's what makes, like, you know, I think before even the cameras are rolling, we were joking about capital D discourse, right? Like the Frank Ocean shit. Like that's what makes capital D discourse. Like people are going to start talking about it. Like I think he headlined like or I don't know if he was the headliner, but he played like a Cali Rolling Loud, or like maybe it was the New York Rolling Loud. But I saw like on TikTok, like this lady was walking away from it in the middle of the set, and she's like, oh, like this is like demon music. Like this is evil. Like this is preaching like fucking Satanism to people.
It's like, you right.
And the fact that it can have that kind of, you know, polarizing impact where somebody, you know, probably a good amount of people are going to leave because they feel that way about it. And, you know, an equal amount of people like are going to just fall in love with it and have it scratch an itch that they've never had even like fucking touched before. It's so cool. It's so cool.
And I think like what's so intentional and like so specific, like this is why I geek out about Whole Lotta Red. It's because like I think the album was like intentionally engineered to. Can I? I'm sorry to like make about myself. Can I read you something I wrote about Whole Lotta Red when it came out?
Hit me.
I think it's like one of my favorite things I've ever written about music. It's like, but I think about this shit all the time, so I'm just happy to be gushing about it.
No, of course. I mean, it's fun to talk to people that like have that passion about that kind of music.
Yeah, because it's so like different. Oh, hold up. It's like this is the last paragraph from this thing that I wrote about Whole Lotta Red right when it came out. It said, okay, preference here, I referenced Kanye. This is before Kanye went off the rails.
Oh, no, you're good. I mean, like, this contextually exists outside of Kanye, like, talking about Hitler.
Fuck Kanye. But anyway, much in the vein of an album like Kanye West 808 and Heartbreak, this LP will most likely never sound better than it does now. Mm-hmm. Many people love the aforementioned album on account of its influence instead of its sound. Whole Lotta Red could have the same dynamic in store for the future. Understanding how such would happen is foggy and confusing, but to say that Whole Lotta Red will lay the foreground for things to come in hip-hop is a very safe assumption.
Yeah.
If its sound were to become something of influence and notoriety, it would need to be expanded on and combined with other sounds and genres to create a product more accessible and appealing. As of now, it hasn't done that. It could very well be the next batch of ideas that influences the next hip-hop classic, but for now it just feels underdeveloped. Whole Lotta Red is annoying, admirable, irritating, grating, and confusing in a way that no album has ever been. Mm-hmm. That was like my full opinion on Whole Lotta Red when I first came out. I was like, I can't listen to this because my palate has never been adapted to something like this.
Yeah.
It's like I've never heard something like this. I can't sit down and listen to this because I never have been challenged to. And then it's like, but I also like, I was like, but there's no fucking way that this doesn't influence so much stuff to come. And then I think in 2 years I'll love it, and I do.
Yeah,
and I knew it would happen.
Look at it now, like that sound is so ubiquitous.
Yes.
Like, and like, you know, like to talk about like not only opium as a whole, but it's like you look at artists like Yeat that have like become really popular recently. Like, you know, Yeat doesn't sound like Whole Lotta Red. Yeat sounds like Yeat, but
exactly.
The DNA of that sound as it exists in a contemporary setting, like, so traces back to Whole Lotta.
For sure,
That sound that, like, Yeat is making popular, I don't think would have been popular without an album like Whole Lotta Red being polarizing first.
Yes.
It's like that album, you know, made a big impact, like, created a lot of conversations. And now that people have... I think another brilliant thing about just the way that album came out was, like... And why it, like, it's hitting so hard live for audiences, too, is, like, think about it. It came out
on Christmas
in the heat of like the year where like everyone was like only staying inside and like fucking, you know, and I think that probably influenced like the way that it was taken initially, right? Like it's such a loud, brazen punk, like you want to knock shit over album to this, and we're all just listening to it on speakers or in headphones on probably for a lot of folks like a really just lonely, depressing fucking Christmas.
For sure.
And feeling so pent up. And then, like, think about you know, like, there were points, like, in that era of, like, quarantine where I was talking to someone about this recently that I was living with at the time, and we'd fully wake up and have conversations about, like, yeah, like, you know, I really don't know when, like, this is gonna end. Like, it was a fucking pretty dismal time. And, like, you know, fast forwarding to now, like, we've sat with that album for 3 years, and now we can go experience it live. I think there's something to, like, releasing that album in an environment that creates all this, you know, for lack of a better word, pent up aggression. And then like, you know, that payoff of then getting to experience it live after the fact. Not only, you know, can you literally enjoy experiencing it like live in an environment with a bunch of people, but you've had all that time to like internalize it and have it pent up and like really grow with it like as an individual. And then you get to go experience it with other people. I mean, once again, haven't had the pleasure of seeing the Whole Lotta Red tour live. I'm just a nerd, and this is what I think of when I see those YouTube videos. I'm like, fuck, like, this is cool.
Did you have... It's funny you bring that up, because I don't think I realized the effect that COVID had on me.
Yeah.
Until maybe the last 6 months. And... Like I never got COVID. Like I don't mean like getting COVID. I mean like, you know, like the state of the world during the pandemic. I didn't realize until recently like how it changed me as an individual, and I think I'm more and more starting to realize how it's changed the world. Mm-hmm. And I really don't think the world will ever be the same. And it's I don't know if you feel this. Like maybe this is like just me like having a personal thought, but I really do feel like there is something about the state of the world post-COVID that feels a little bit less gleaming than the state of the world pre-COVID. And I think it's hard to like put your finger on it. It's hard to pin down, but it's like, to me, like the general state of people just seems different. Do you think you've had like any similar experience to that?
Yeah, I mean, like I think definitely people seem a little more disgruntled. I think we'll see it a little more because I mean, like I'm on that like kind of weird like millennial Gen Z cusp, right? So like I got to.
You're
like,
25.
26.
26, okay.
I think I'm still like fairly immature for somebody my age. I mean, like look at like what
Me too.
look at like what I'm doing and like how my life is. But like at the same time, it's like, you know, physiologically and emotionally, I'd kind of done a lot of my, you know, formative years in development before that happened. So I think like I at least got to engage with COVID fully as an adult.
So you were 22?
I was
23?
I was 23
okay.
when it hit. I turned 24 over and 25 over quarantine. Quarantine was like lifted off a little bit by the time I turned 25.
Yeah.
But like, you know, turning 24 like full on in it. And yeah, like I feel for kids who like had to go through like their last couple years of high school or first couple years of college, like in that environment. I think we're not really gonna fully see the implications of that until like those kids become like whole ass adults.
It's weird like to think about that because like I don't even think I realized that till like recently.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm just now starting to comprehend the way in which it affected me.
Yeah, I mean like how would you like for instance like how have you seen that it's affected the way that you interface with stuff?
I didn't have social anxiety before COVID, like
really
at all.
That's crazy.
And that's not the same anymore. And I it's very, very, very distinguishable to a period of time. Mm-hmm. It's very much like it's so like ingrained in like a post-COVID and a pre-COVID mindset, and the way in which I look at the world. And I think there's been habits and things I've had to reverse engineer and mindsets I've had that I've had to reverse engineer that I adopted within COVID. Like I think like in almost like unconsciously, like I developed a more negative way to filter my day to day. That like it's not even like I like thought about like I was like it wasn't even a conscious thing. It's not like I was like the world sucks so I hate everything now, but it was just like the world sucked, and because of that, like your unconscious brain just starts to filter the way you look at the world, and it's really, really crazy that you don't start noticing it till a couple years later. And it's also like, I mean, think about that time. It's like not only was there this pandemic, but it's like politically the world was more divided than it's ever been. It's like there was like the murder of George Floyd and all these things happened at once. It's like it was all it felt like no matter where you stand on like any of like the COVID or whatever was going on, it's like it just felt like the world was ending. And even if you didn't think it was, like that thought crossed your mind. Like I remember like, I mean, when COVID happened, like in the heat of the pandemic, I was like, I think I was 18 or I was 19. Yeah, I was 19. I mean, I was healthy. I never like was afraid of like, I never was like, I'm gonna get COVID and die. You know, I was like, you know, most likely like I'm healthy, I'm young, like I'll be okay. But there was a period where like we didn't know that. And I think there was like, I don't think I'll ever forget this. Like I wasn't scared of it at all. And then there was like a day where I remember like my mom was listening to the news and I was in like the bathroom and I was like woken up and was washing my face or whatever. And I remember like hearing like the news talking about like, the cases rising or whatever. And then I remember like washing my hands and I remember I had like my first conscious like note of fear from COVID. I was like, what if I got it? Like, what if it happened? And then I think it's like, even if that was never even like a fully valid fear, given like the you know, the physical state that I was in, it's that like looming animosity, that looming fear, that looming negativity that I think like fully shifted my mindset in a lot of ways that I'm having to reverse engineer.
Well, it's being confronted with mortality really for the first time explicitly. Yeah. And then not only were we all kind of, I think, confronted with our own not that it was everybody's first time being confronted with their own mortality, right? But like definitely mine. Like I can remember, you know, like explicit times or like that was the thing present in my brain because of the nature of things, right? And like, not only were we all being confronted with our mortality at the same time, but like, you know, this is the other thing that I think like really affected everybody, but the way that we like largely as a symbiotic body interfaced with that confrontation of mortality is all through our phones and all through the internet. Like you're really
changed our brains.
looking death. It's that trauma of like really like, for a lot of folks looking at death and the idea of death and the idea that you could, something out of your control could strip you of this life that you feel so much agency over for the first time. And then like all having to come to terms with that being the, I guess, flavor of existence for like the world, like all just through your phone and through social media and all sort of like,
it's like not a proper way for your brain to compute it.
It's not, well, I mean, like, like proper or not, it's just not a precedented way. I mean, like, I think,
it's like new.
The more that we have kids, like, I think people like my age and older, and well, I think really everyone, because it is, I guess, like an annoying thing to like be in a social situation with, but everyone likes to like shit on like, like iPad kids and like, oh, like these kids that like grow up like having an iPad like placate their attention span is like going to be really terrible when they grow up. And it's like, yeah, that shit's probably going to be like terrible in certain ways, but in other ways, like they're going to be a lot more prepared to like interface with technology as a fundamental way of existing. Cause it is,
that's an interesting thought.
Like, people like, I feel lucky to exist on that cusp where like, I can remember a specific time in like 3rd or 4th grade where it became like, okay, now we're using computers like in everyday life.
Me too, yeah.
Whereas like, I still had a couple years of being conscious and, we were using like books in school and shit, like doing it analog. So like,
what the hell is that?
Like, I feel like I've kind of had this, I've gotten to experience both sides of it. It's like where it was like, okay, I got to like grow up a little bit, or I got to see the shift in technology, but I got to spend enough time growing up with technology to like become somewhat acclimated to it. But like, I can't relate to, and this is even crazy to think about. It's like that, like to someone my age, it's like we think of technology in life as like this sort of umbrella thing, but like there are tiers to which with people of certain age groups like interface with it. And like kids younger than me are going to be way more tapped into like, not just technology as a thing, but the way that technology...
subculture that comes with
it.
Yeah,
to like culture and like, to memes and things like that, and to humor and to a language. I mean, like, it's that big thing, right? Is like, you look at different age groups like making TikToks or something, and it's like, there's like the millennial pause versus like the Zoomer like shaking their phone. I hate using the word like...
That's interesting.
I feel like using the word Zoomer unironically like really dates me as a person, but like...
What is Zoomer like?
It's just like Gen Z,
What all of our like little siblings would be? Is that like, so it's like 15, 16-year-olds, I mean, I guess?
I was talking to someone about this recently, and I think 1996 is the cutoff year, so like I'm technically Gen Z too. It's like me and anyone younger than me.
Is Gen Z.
Yeah, so like you guys are Gen Z.
So I'm 2001.
Yeah, you're Gen Z.
Okay.
Like I'm Gen Z too, technically. I don't feel like... I'm kind of at that weird cutoff point. I keep saying I'm at this weird cutoff point. But like I'm at that cutoff point where it's like I don't necessarily like all the way feel like it in terms of like my cultural understanding, but technically on the timeline I am.
Okay.
And so is everyone. I think at this point, kids who are like babies are probably something different. The media just hasn't come up with a name for it yet.
Oh, for sure. I guess like post-COVID babies probably are an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
That's so weird to think about. That is so bizarre.
We're not even going to see the implications of that for like I'm going to be like 40.
Long time, yeah.
It's going to be crazy.
You ever think about kids that were born during the pandemic?
Yeah, a lot, and then I just can't think about it anymore. But
that's fucked.
Although it does give me a little hope now. Like I was recently, I think I was at like La Brea, like around the La Brea tar pits with my girlfriend like a while back. Not a while, it was like a couple weeks ago. And we were just like watching like a kid's soccer camp, and like it was kind of cool because like now like kids can go outside and run around and like excuse me, your burp. It was definitely like a really cool, I don't know. I think also just like being inside, you forget about fundamental human experiences like this, but seeing like parents like run around with their kids is like so cool. It's like I remember being that kid, and I remember being at soccer camp and wanting to go pretend to be a dinosaur like instead.
Yeah.
And so like largely, I mean, I think once again like the implications of like, I love using the phrase COVID baby. That sounds like such a news like soundbite, right?
The
like,
COVID babies.
The COVID babies, right? But like they're also like just they're just kids.
They're just kids,
like seeing stuff that was fundamental to like my childhood experience, like still very much be fundamental to like
that's so real.
Like a toddler's experience these days. That kind of gives me hope. But there is shit that we're not gonna see till like kids are like at least teenagers. And
For sure.
That's a trip to think about.
It's like it's you know what it's like? It's like, you know, people say if you want to have a dog and a cat coexist in a household, you should introduce them to each other when they're puppies and like kittens. It's like that. Like think about like these kids, right? It's like these COVID babies, like the COVID baby kids that were born and they didn't like imagine like being born and then from the ages of like 0 to like 1.5 never seeing anybody outside of your family.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna, of course, like your brain's gonna develop in a totally different way than like yours or mine did. You know, because like I'm sure we grew up and we saw like all kinds of people, like you know,
like our like ideally like our parents like took us out to the park or whatever, like went on walks. Yeah, like some of my formative memories like are sitting in a stroller and like, you know, next to my little brother and us being pushed, and it was like backwards facing so we could look up at our mom and look up at like the things we were passing by. Like I remember like the fire station in New Jersey that we used to like pass by.
Yeah.
Like I remember like the people that we'd pass on our walks. Like I remember the Dunkin' Donuts that was like on the other side of our block, like on the way back.
like their version of that's gonna be like their house.
Yeah, just their house.
Or their dog.
Fucking crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
I think it's gonna be also funny if like, cause I don't know, like there's like every generation, every pair of generations like has some sort of antagonistic dynamic with one another.
True.
And like, you know, like you're already seeing like millennials and Gen Z like shitting on each other for like the way that each other like behave on the internet. I wonder how like Gen Z and like I can't wait till someone comes up with a better name than COVID babies. But that's what we're gonna use for now.
The COVID
like,
babies.
Gen Z and like COVID babies like becoming older. Like Gen Z being like, I mean, like I say this like as technically part of Gen Z, you know what I mean? I always feel more on the millennial side because I'm like the oldest you can be in Gen Z, but like. Yeah, like the same.
So what are millennials? Like what is the cutoff? You said 96?
So probably like 95, I think. 96, 95 is like the cutoff, I think, for millennials.
So like it'd be like what, 95 to like 85, I guess?
Something like that. I don't know what makes Gen X at this point. Like when I think about like when I hear Gen X, I think about people that like would have been like teenagers or in college when like Nirvana came out.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like my cousin who's like in his early 40s now type shit.
Okay,
is like
yeah.
Gen X. Which is funny. That was like the lazy, like slacker generation. That's like, oh, like you kids have like your Nirvana and like
They seem kind of sick.
Columbine or whatever. I'm not to make light of Columbine, obviously, because
Yeah.
school shootings are like still, you know, an even bigger problem now. But like, you know, the discourse, the capital D discourse, right? That like happened around Columbine about like video games influencing kids to be violent and like, you know, Marilyn Manson or like the music they were listening to and like, you know,
so crazy to go back and watch those
grunge
videos.
subcultures and stuff. Like those were sort of like the talking points around Gen X, to my understanding.
Yeah.
Right. So it's funny to think about like, and those are the things that like boomers were criticizing Gen X for. Like, I think I was too little to really pay attention to, you know, I think I was still like watching SpongeBob. I mean,
Yeah.
Like, I say that as if I don't still watch SpongeBob like every day. But I was still like in my formative age of watching SpongeBob when like Gen Xers would have been shitting on millennials. So like I don't know what Gen Xers shit on millennials for. I know what Gen Z shits on millennials for.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, being like awkward and like kind of stupid on the internet, like type shit and like blah blah blah. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like the way that Gen Z shits on COVID babies when they're both like enough of adults to like in the way that Gen Z and millennials are now to like have a back and forth.
I wonder if it'd become like a victim battle thing.
Oh, I'm sure it always does.
Like I feel like it always does.
Every time. I mean, like it's
like you went through COVID, I went through the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
like,
it's like, oh, like, you know, like COVID, 9/11, AIDS.
Yeah.
And you know, not to say all those things are equal, you know, terribleness. Also not to tier terribleness, you know. I'm probably just like not gonna go there, but
it's almost
there's nuance to it.
Yeah, there's 100% nuance to it, but it's also like it's like it's like the what do they call it? Like the victim Olympics.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we gonna compare like 9/11 to like, you know, COVID or whatever? And it's like, I don't think there's any like I think like the bigger understanding, like ideals, just acknowledge people's struggle.
Yeah.
You know, and like be sympathetic and understanding to it.
There's also like, you know, I think we can simultaneously recognize that everyone has a different reference point
For sure.
for
yeah.
shit being terrible. Like the most terrible to one group of people is gonna be different than the most terrible to another group of people.
Definitely.
But I think we can simultaneously and parallel recognize that like a lot of privilege goes into something like watching an event happen on the news being the most terrible thing that happened to you versus like
being at the event,
experiencing, you know, subjugation and things of, you know, that ilk firsthand. Yeah. That, you know, like for one, like I can't relate to on a personal basis. Like, yeah, there's shit in my own personal upbringing, like with my family that like I would have liked to have not experienced, but like still like I got to grow up in the suburbs as like a privileged white kid. So it's like, you know, I'm not going to speak to my basis versus other people's basis for tragedy too much.
It's interesting that you brought up like remembering like the Dunkin' Donuts in like New Jersey.
I do.
I think it's so funny, like the things that we remember versus the things that we don't. Like for example, like my parallel to that is like where I grew up. There was a adult education center in Concord on my street, and I don't think I'll ever like forget like how that adult education center looked.
Yeah.
And it's interesting like how you can compare and contrast those things and like what you remember and what you don't, because like, you know, kind of looping it back to what we were just talking about, it's like those kids, like it's crazy to me that like their overwhelming thoughts are gonna be like, I remember my house. I remember like
the rocking chair.
Yeah, like that's so crazy to me. So you grew up in New Jersey?
Not quite. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. So it was like I was born in San Diego, and then my dad did school in Grenada, like in the Caribbean. So like I'm probably fucking this timeline up too because I was like so little for all of this moving. But it was San Diego, I think, then like Grenada, then St. Vincent.
In the Caribbean? You lived in the Caribbean?
Like as like a 1-year-old.
That's
so
cool,
like
though.
I don't consciously remember any of it. I do know based on my mom's telling that the first time I ever like laughed like crazy. Well, and it's funny because my sense of humor is still like the same. Like my mom loves to tell the story about how like the first time I ever like laughed like crazy as a baby was being in Grenada and seeing this like there was this giant bullfrog, I guess, that got into our house. And it started like hopping around, and I guess I thought it was really funny. It just started like dying. I still think that shit is really funny. If you show me if you pull up a good bullfrog video, I will have a chuckle. But
pull up a solid bullfrog vid.
Exactly. But it was like Grenada, St. Vincent, I think, for a little bit, and then Brooklyn. We lived in Brooklyn in like Park Slope when I was like 2. That's where my brother was born. And then we moved to New Jersey when I was like 3 for a couple years. And I lived in New Jersey in a little town called Wallington from about 3 to like right after my 6th birthday. And then we moved back to San Diego, and I lived in San Diego till college.
So San Diego was like where you grew up?
Yeah, I proper grew up in San Diego. But I have formative memories in like New Jersey. And so I think maybe probably before Brooklyn, because I don't think my brother was around yet when we lived here. And then my sister was born in New Jersey. So like, you know, siblings pop up. I don't really remember a time before my brother that well. But at one point...
So your brother's older than you or younger?
Younger.
Okay.
He looks a lot older and he's a lot more mature. But like younger than me. And we lived in like kind of like my parents always say Oakland, but it was like, I mean, you've lived in, are you from the Bay Area or just like lived there? Yeah. So like, you know, like San Leandro.
Yeah.
I lived in like San Leandro for a little bit.
Oh, okay. My grandparents live in Alameda.
No shit. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really know Alameda like that. I just know it's by there. But yeah. So a lot of moving around.
Wow. So how long do you live in San Leandro?
Probably like less than a year.
Oh, okay.
I think it was before Brooklyn, because I don't remember my brother being around. I have one memory of San Leandro, and it's not even real. It's like a nightmare that I had when we lived there. I remember a nightmare about like an evil Thomas the Tank Engine chasing me. Like, just, I don't even think it had like sharp teeth. I think it was one of those things where like as a little kid, it's just scary in your dream and you like know it's evil and then it wants to get you. So, and you know, at that age also, like dreams are so indistinguishable from like real life that you remember them vividly as memories. So I remember having that nightmare in Oakland, and that's all I know from it. I probably remember a little bit from, actually I don't think I remember Brooklyn at all. I think I just remember Oakland because of that nightmare. But then like New Jersey is like obviously like, I remember
memories from there.
Yeah, like me and my brother running around as kids in the park, and my sister being born, and like shit like that.
Okay, so like musically, like your upbringing was like in San Diego, and right? Like when you really got into music, you think?
I mean, no, it's been around my entire fucking life.
Are your parents musicians?
Lightly.
Okay.
My dad always played guitar around the house growing up. It was always around. Like, I remember thinking it was really cool, not being able to wrap my head around like how it was done. But I love that. Like my mom eventually ended up like when me and my brother first started taking music lessons as like middle schoolers, my mom like picked up the bass around that time because she'd always wanted to learn how to play bass.
That's cool.
But both my parents are musically inclined, and there was always good music playing around the house. Like, I mean, the first shit I fell in love with was like movie soundtracks, kind of like specifically like Danny Elfman and like John Williams soundtracks, like fucking, and lullabies too. Like I think that's why I make like pop music, is because like I couldn't sleep unless my mom would sing me fucking like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or like, you know, like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, coming for to carry me home, type shit. Like, so that kind of stuff's always been around. I think the first like, you know, like I use the broad phrase pop song, right?
Yeah.
Like encompassing rock and stuff. But the first like pop songs I remember having an effect on me were like Led Zeppelin. Like I remember two songs specifically.
That's interesting. That's like pretty similar to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember it was Kashmir and Black Dog.
Okay. Yeah.
Kashmir I loved because the strings in that felt like a movie soundtrack. So I was like, I imagined like a crazy adventure to this song. So I fuck with this. And then Black Dog, because I thought the line about like big-legged woman ain't got no soul was like so funny. I don't even think that's the lyric. I think that's how I heard the lyric. And I would like sing it in public, and my mom would get like really anxious about me saying that in public.
Yeah.
But it was that, and then the first like CD that my parents ever bought for us was like the Shrek soundtrack, the Shrek 1 soundtrack, which I maintain, by the way,
kind of some bangers on
is
the Shrek
like
1 soundtrack.
one of the best albums ever. And then from that, I remember the first album that I asked like my parents to get. I was like so fucking little. I wouldn't have even been like 6 at this time. Like maybe I was 6 or about to turn 6. But off of that album, Smash Mouth Astro Lounge, which I've been revisiting, by the way. And like, if you are watching this and have not listened to that album in full, it's a perfect fucking album.
San Jose reppin'.
There's San Jose, yeah, they are from San Jose, huh?
San Jose reppin'.
No, there is not a miss. Not only is there not a song that's a miss, there is not a moment on a song that's wasted on that record. Like,
I don't think I've ever listened to it front to back.
Listen to it front to back. It's perfect pop music.
Yeah.
There is not a second wasted. Everything has intention. The production's immaculate. The songwriting, you know, like nothing's like crazy deep or anything. You know, it's like,
but it's fully intentional. Yeah.
There is care. Like you really get the impression, or at least I do, that the people that went into making that album, like they were having a lot of fun. I cannot imagine making that album and not having like the time of your fucking life.
That's such a cool way to describe it.
They care. You hear that, and like, there's so much attention put into the craft. But sorry, you got me nerding out about a piece of, you know, noticing a trend. I like to nerd out over pieces of art that mean a lot to me.
Literally, like, stop apologizing. Read that fourth rule right there.
What's the fourth one? I gotta lean over.
I think it's fourth.
Communicate.
Or 2, I'm sorry, 2.
Yeah. We'll never be like these music industry weirdos. If you're a fan of someone, tell them. Oh yeah, Smash Mouth, I fucking love you. I know Steve Harwell. I know Steve Harwell retired because of that weird, like, because that show. Have you seen that video? Like, I don't want to make light of like whatever Steve Harwell was going through in this video, but it's like the last Smash Mouth performance before he retired.
I haven't seen it.
They were just doing this concert. I'm not sure if he's like drunk or like what's going on, but like he's clearly like fucking sick of the Shrek meme. Like this was the time in which like Smash Mouth would play like college campuses, and like kids are showing up in the thousands in like Shrek merch. So like, you know, I think it becomes better contextualized if you listen to like Astro Lounge as an album and realize that in the pop sense, like that shit is high fucking art. Yeah. And like, so I kind of feel for them to be reduced to the Shrek meme, which ironically is because
that kind of sucks.
They wrote a song for Shrek that's
so perfect,
so ubiquitous. Yeah. Like that song is one of the songs of all time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everyone knows that fucking song.
One of these songs of all time.
But like, anyway, like I can't get into Steve Harwell's head because I'm not Steve Harwell. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, Steve Harwell. If you're what?
Shout out to Steve Harwell.
Shout out Steve Harwell. But I don't want to make like light of whatever he was going through because I just like don't know.
It's interesting. Like
pretty pretty intense though. It's like he's on stage, they're playing All Star, and he's just not having it. Like the crowd's like throwing bread at him, and he starts just like, but he starts like cussing people out. And the funniest thing is the band is playing the intro to All Star while he's saying this unhinged shit. It's like the band is going boom.
I'm sorry. I gotta watch this.
That you just if you look up just like Steve Harwell meltdown, it'll fucking show up. Like
no way.
So it's like the band is playing like boom. Bum, 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 bum,
no way he's cussing people out over that.
And then he's saying like, "I will kill your entire fucking family," like one? While they're playing. It's that.
Oh, there's no way. What'd you say? Put it in the mic. Okay. Mario, we'll set it up so you can put stuff on screen after this, but.
Yeah, it's like if you listen to like they start just playing the song. I'm like, this sound is prime.
Why are they
So
still
good.
playing? Like,
So
why
good.
didn't they stop?
Honestly, like,
I love it. You should hear the bass line, bum bum, bum bum.
I like to think that they just keep playing like cause they're based. Like that's like the only reason. Like they're just like, you know what would be like fucking insanely funny is like let's just keep the track fucking going. And he's like, he literally like I forget if it's like during the intro or if it's like later, but he like threatens to kill someone's entire family, and they're just fucking pointing away at that. Like it's so good. Like you can't make that shit up. It's amazing. But yeah, I mean to go back like.
That's so
Smash
funny.
Mouth, one of the formative bands for me. I think they made like, you know, like in my opinion, they made like a Michael Jackson Thriller tier album. Like that shit is impeccably good. But yeah, that was some of the first shit that I grew up listening to. And yeah, I mean like I started playing music, like making it myself. I always sang. Like I remember very early on. And like, I'll be the first to admit this. Like, I remember very early on having an experience, like, it was like singing in front of my kindergarten class. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, okay. This is like, I can do something that I really like already, and people will like pay attention to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, excuse me.
Everybody loves attention. Some people just refuse to admit it.
Especially as like a kid.
Of course,
my God.
Yeah.
And like a kid with siblings too, when you feel still that intrinsic, like, you know, I don't know about it being like necessarily in like the Freudian sense, but like you do feel this intrinsic need to like compete for your parents' attention.
Very much so.
So like attention as a kid becomes like, I feel like attention is money before money is money. You know, like obviously depending on like what your upbringing is, but I think largely for a lot of folks, like in terms of things in your existence being like a currency.
Have you ever heard the phrase attention economy?
I have now.
That's a phrase. That's a phrase I think about a lot because I think like the attention economy is sometimes more important than money. Because you know when you think about like for example like now right if you want to be a musician like what is the most important thing you could possibly have
or even just
people's attention
or the most immediately commodifiable thing.
True.
Because I mean like I feel like you know like I'm not an economist and I can't off the bat like pull up the fucking bar graphs to back this up. But at least like immediately coming to mind, I can't think of like a more lucrative industry right now, especially post-COVID, like with social media, like than advertising. Like the hottest commodity is people's attention.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that does make a lot of sense.
Well, that's like why you're doing, you know, like if you're doing something like what we do, like want to do like a media company, it's like the most sellable thing is views.
Yeah.
Like people don't give a shit how many like subscribers or likes you have. That number means nothing to advertisers because it doesn't equate to eyes.
No.
What equates to eyes is views.
Yeah, it's like just the simple act of like, was this like, you know, attention grabbing enough to make a bunch of people like fucking watch it? You know, something as attention grabbing such as like Steve Harwell going on a rant at like the Smash Mouth show. But yeah.
So when you were growing up, like I guess like I would jump to like either your time in New Jersey or your time in San Diego. Do you remember like a moment where you truly fell in love with music? Like, do you remember a point in your life where you were like, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
I'm trying to think.
I guess it's hard to pinpoint one moment, but
Like, I think for performing and for creating music, it would be different moments.
yes.
I think, like, when I first started writing songs, like, probably around, like, the age of, like, 13, and, like, I started in piano lessons at, like, 7. Like, my grandparents had this neighbor. Shout out Del Schroeder. You're a fucking legend. I love you.
Del Schroeder.
Del Schroeder. I would pronounce it Schroeder. I'd heard it pronounced Schroeder and Schrader.
Okay.
I used to call her Miss Schrader. But
Shout
then
out to Miss Schrader.
people would call her Miss Schroeder, too. I think,
Aw.
yeah, it's weird. I grew up and started calling her Schroeder, but I will call you Miss Schrader because you were always Miss Schrader to me. I love you. You're a fucking icon. You're a legend. Thank you. But,
Shout out Miss Schrader.
yeah, shout out Miss Schrader. But yeah, I mean, that was, you know, like I started learning a little music theory and like C major scale type shit at like 7. And I think it probably would have been like the first, I think I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I think it would have been the first time that like I paired the gratification of like, the artistic side of it probably with like the gratification of attention. I think like it would have been, so there's 2 music teachers that I think are like so pivotal to like the person that I am.
Yeah.
And the other one was a guy in San Diego that like, I think they're both still doing what they do. Like the second person is for sure, but Glenn Fisher, who, and like everyone in almost everyone that had ever been in Fashion Jackson as well, like we all have Glenn Fisher to thank for everything. There's a little kind of mini scene that came out of like being students of Glenn Fisher.
What?
Like, there's artists in the LA scene.
That's
like,
so cool.
I mean, like Jake Nuffer comes from Glenn Fisher. I don't know if you're familiar with like Sahara Grimm. She's an artist kind of in LA.
No.
She does more sort of like weird, like kind of tinged on experimental. Like I would describe her stuff as like sort of jazzy R&B in the vein of maybe like a Hiatus Coyote.
Oh, cool.
But with like a Bjork sensibility.
Oh, cool.
Like, you know, it's folks that all came from like we all took lessons under this one guy in San Diego, and then we kind of moved
This
on.
guy's
to
a
all do-
goat, man.
the goat, Glenn Fisher. But I think it would like he would do his music lessons were different because like it wasn't just like a one-on-one like okay I'm gonna show a kid how to play an instrument. It was like I'm gonna get kids that like you know you could sign up. I think for his lessons in groups if you wanted to, but you just get put in a group if you didn't. And like me and my brother just like got put in groups, but like he would teach kids how to be in a band together. Here's how you learn a song as a band.
It's like School of Rock.
Yeah, here's how you like learn your like because there's one thing learning a part or learning a piece of music as like you know a soloist, but like Glenn's thing was like okay like here's how you learn your part in the context of what like a whole group is playing.
Oh, that's
like,
so cool.
Here's how you learn to have a conversation with your instrument and like how to play in an ensemble with other people. So I think probably like so he'd you know like we'd have lessons once a week and then it was called First Friday Club. It still is, I think, called First Friday Club. But, you know, it eventually became, it was called First Friday because when he first started doing it, it was like, oh, like all the kids' bands that have been in these lessons will like have a performance on the first Friday of every month. And by the time that me and my brother got there, it became like the first Saturday, which was really funny. But there would be these performances first Saturday of every month where we'd perform for like, you know, the other kids that were in lessons, everyone's parents.
Cool.
Wait, we only have what?
Oh, no, we're chilling. We're good. What'd you say?
We only have your.
Oh. This one died?
We could, if there's only going to be my voice for this point forward, maybe we can put like auto tune on my vocals so it's like, entertaining.
Yeah, this one still says battery exhausted.
Ha! We're exhausting.
We're goddamn exhausting.
We're so tiring. Speaking of like crushing length.
Well, we can just wrap it up with this angle.
Yeah, fuck
If
it.
we can just finish this thought.
Switch seats real quick.
Want to handheld this hoe, Mario?
Huh?
Want to handheld this, John?
Oh, not really. But
Just for like 2 minutes?
Love the honesty though. You know,
Yeah.
you got to be real about like.
Nah, you gotta be. Anyway,
That-
finish your thought. What were you saying?
That reminds me of fucking.
Just untwist that bad boy. Like that little thing at the bottom of the tripod should detach the headpiece. Nope. A little bit higher, right there. Yeah, right there. Or wait, no, one more up. Move your finger up. That guy.
oh, this.
That guy.
Wait, if we're gonna end this on a final thought, I'm gonna actually just pivot to something that's probably more interesting than what I was talking about. Because I don't know what it was. Something about the exchange that we all just had reminded me of like DaBaby's like homophobic rant about one concert that got him canceled. You know what the funniest part of that video is?
What the fuck?
Is the DJ ad libs. Like something about the exchange.
He ad libs it?
Something about the exchange we just had like made me, because like DaBaby's saying like, you know, it's like, oh, like, you know, put your hands up if you don't like have fucking like AIDS or one of those like deadly diseases. Yeah. Like, and you know.
No way there's no way the DJ's like,
DJ, well, no, the DJ's just saying stuff like super dire too. Like, let's be real about this shit. Like, come on, like fucking, we gotta say it. Like, that was just funny. I don't know. I just thought of that for some reason. So I would rather make that tangent the final thought than whatever thing about me I was talking about. So.
That's beautiful.
It's great.
That reminds me. Never mind. I'm not gonna go into that. There was another incredibly offensive rant that somebody went out on stage, but there's a lot of those. Anyway, Estelle, thank you, my friend.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
It was awesome. Thank you both for having me.
Of course. Tell them where they can find you, stream your new project, everything.
My shit is on all DSPs, as we say in the music industry. Woo! DSP, but I'm not coming off as like quirky. I just had too much caffeine. But my shit's on Spotify, Apple Music as Estelle Allen. That's me, and I have a music video on YouTube, and I got more music coming soon. So check it out. You know, it's the worst hyperpop you've ever heard, and it's only hyperpop. So if you don't like hyperpop, don't check it. There's nothing. No That's nuance.
All it is.
Nothing of substance to be checking out outside of that wheelhouse.
Hell yeah.
No, thank you guys for having me. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. Appreciate you. All right, music matters.
Music matters.